Standing before the evaluator, the stern patriarch kept little Noah right beside him and demanded an instant verdict on the boy's secret gift. 5-year-old Noah, heir to the Gimnoa lineage, stared at the bewildered tester with eyes huge and unblinking as he tripped over every single word. Finally, Noah's evaluator snapped up the nerve to speak, declaring that the only thing Noah had ever proven was rune deciphering, and that nothing else, not one power, had ever truly awakened in him. The Aldgame clan was one of the oldest and most feared names in magical nobility, praised for generations of legendary wizards and arcane techniques no one else could replicate. So everyone figured Noah's firstborn would be a rare talent that would lift the family's glory even higher, until the truth crashed through every last hope. Lord Gamehild, the family's head, was left speechless. How could his own son have 0 battle magic, 0 elemental control, when that was supposed to be the proud beating heart of their entire dynasty? Noah stared at his father, completely lost. Then his father snapped and shouted his name with barely restrained fury, and the anger finally hit him. In a snap, the patriarch's palm cracked across his son's cheek and his thunderous roar shook the whole house, because the boy had humiliated their family in front of the world. Driven by madness, he snapped at everyone. How could Noah stain the clan that the whole magical society worships? The boy opened his mouth to answer, but his father yanked the words away and publicly renounced it. Hildegand sprinted to the door, drowning out the evaluator's panicked warnings, while Noah trailed behind, choking out tearful apologies, and the only sound was a gloomy echo of footsteps. The whole estate sat in oppressive silence, like even the walls were trembling and holding their breath in fear. A few days later, Noah was making his way down the corridor when a maid darted up to him. Then the moment he greeted her, she bolted away like she couldn't stand to be near him. From that moment on, every servant dodged his path and Noah instantly got it. His father had ordered silence. Still, their jittery looks screamed worry as doubts hung in the air. Hoping to dodge condemnation, the boy kept his manners razor-sharp, praying his courtesy would crack the silence, but not a single voice answered him. All alone, he shut himself away in the massive library, diving into book after book until the hurt faded, just enough to chase distant dreams. One day, Noah sat on the library floor, totally locked in on his book. Then his eyes snapped wide with shock because what he was reading was insanely complex, and he couldn't help wondering if it had something to do with his own ability to decipher. The next morning, he stared down the bookshelf, hunting for his next read. Then the sinking truth hit. He'd already devoured every single book in that room. Then the boy stepped into the inner courtyard, dropped onto a stone slab, and stared ahead in deep thought, until his eyes snagged on a weird, out-of-place stone. As he got closer, his breath caught. This wasn't just any stone, it was a slab carved with strange, unreadable symbols. Before long, he slid into his seat and began transferring those symbols onto paper with razor focus, staring them down and catching every tiny detail. Later, curled up beside the stove, he pored over those symbols and finally cracked it. This wasn't random writing, it was a clue to hidden storage or even an ancient book. Then he realized something huge. Right on the stove itself were extra clues, and they had to be accounted for in the solution. A whole month tore by, and in his room, Noah, buried under a mountain of scribbled notes, finally cracked every last symbol carved into the slab. He dashed to the librarian and, just like his notes demanded, he lined the books up perfectly, every single one in the exact spot. Right then, a wardrobe creaked and swung open, and boom, a hidden passage yawned in the wall. Noah stood there stunned, then inched forward like he was afraid the moment might disappear, because he couldn't wrap his head around the fact this was actually happening. He hurried down the secret stairs and boom, glowing stones lit up the walls like magic, the exact same light those ancient books promised. Right by that weird door, he spotted the same symbols again, and when he read the inscription, the truth hit him. An ancient knowledge library was hiding behind them. The door creaked open, and right in front of him stretched a colossal hall where towering shelves sagged under the weight of ancient tomes. Even though the room sat underground, it still shimmered with a dazzling magical glow, making everything feel unreal, like a dream you can touch. And Noi, she hadn't read a single one of those books because each one looked like a goldmine of knowledge. On the central table, Noah spotted a towering old tome, its battered cover practically begging him to crack it open and uncover whatever secret was hiding inside. The moment he grabbed the tome, a storm of encoded magic surged through him, and with his breath held tight, he snapped open the first page. The story was written in this wild, whimsical tongue. Figuring it out would have taken weeks, but that guy had all the time in the world. Noah couldn't escape it. His father's verdict rang in his head: "You are no longer my son," and hot tears silently burned down his cheeks. That deciphering, the one his father mocked, ended up being the one safe haven, and the exact key that unlocked what came next. In battle magic, he's basically useless, but when it comes to unraveling how the universe is built, he's priceless. Deciphering it could redraw the very foundations of reality and build an all-new blueprint for existence. It all comes down to those little symbols. Most people barely even notice them, but they're the real reason everything happens. They held the strings of his life, and back then Noah had no idea how terrifyingly strong they really were. All he could think about was this: at 15, he'd have to leave the estate forever, no turning back. No combat talent meant no leadership of the Aldheim clan, grim truth, no exceptions. That day, the boy hid away in a secret library, sinking into piles of yellowed books, staring at his last move like it could decide everything. At last, he rose from the floor, certain this night was going to be the end of these walls, and the last breath of his childhood memories. When the eldest son hit 15, the ancient tradition slammed the door shut. He was no longer allowed to stay under his family's roof. With courage blazing in his chest, Noah strode through the mansion and thanked every servant who'd quietly backed him all these years. The servants slid past in dead silence. He knew that cold hush, but still he bowed to every single one. He didn't do it out of duty, he did it with a real heart, because their secret kindness once pulled him back from loneliness. It was her who lit the spark inside him, the same desire to treat others the way he'd always longed to be treated. As Noah strode down the corridor, a calm spark lit up inside him. Life would keep moving as long as he stayed loyal to his own heart. The second he cracked into the yard, a mocking voice snapped from behind Glenn, his younger brother. Glenn grinned and announced that Noah's expulsion left him as the family head's true, undisputed heir. He bragged non-stop about his combat magic and total mastery of fire, while Noah just nodded, cool as ice, like he'd already seen it all. The boy finally confessed: "If you don't have special talent, no spell will ever answer you," and he swore it was the truth. Even with different mothers, he swore they're still brothers, so he'd never want Glenn hurt, not for a second. The younger one just scoffed, snapped that Noah was a disgrace to the household, and swore he wouldn't mourn their failure. Noah's eyes lit up as his brother's laughter echoed, and it dragged him straight back to his parents' verdict, so with a small, sharp smile, he leaned in and asked Glenn what part of it made him the happiest. He just shot back one blunt truth: Noah's too foolish, and he's got zero magic talent, just like his father always said. Glenn lifted his hand, and with his palm out, a flame snapped to life and flickered between his fingers. A first-level fireball whirled in his palm, blazing with raw power, and it also jabbed at his heart, reminding him of how his brother was branded as worthless. Noah stayed calm, and in the firelight's flickering reflections, he didn't see defeat. He saw a spark, urging him to break out on his own untamed road. Glenn gripped a blazing orb that spun like a furnace in his hand, then ripped it forward and slammed it straight at his brother. Noah could feel his brother's magic roaring with power, but he refused to let that fire so much as graze him. As soon as the breeze hit him, he flung the burning projectile aside, and the flames shattered into a storm of sparks. Noah kept tearing back through every hidden grimoire, page after page, until he scraped up knowledge that no one in the ordinary world was ever meant to find. His gift for deciphering cracked open a treasure trove of ancient symbols, nothing like the runes people use today. Every sign hid a whole universe of meaning, locked in with brutal, unstoppable power. Figuring it out was a real test. That kid refused to back down. 10 grueling years of toil, and then the runes fused with his very mind, letting him create without a single spell. The grimoires in the ancestral repository cracked open ancient magic inside him, and it instantly crushed the power of modern elements. Glenn blurted out in pure confusion, scrambling for his fire, while Noah just grinned like, "Yeah, messing with flames around here is gonna bite you." Rage boiled in his brother's veins as he barked, "Shut up and get out." Then he stormed toward the estate, and Noah was left standing there all alone. The boy felt crushed that they never truly clicked, but fate shoved them apart and there was no stopping it. Right as he closed in on the gate, it hit him. This moment wasn't coming anymore, it was already decided, growing inevitable for ages. "I've lived inside books my whole life, but now, no more reading only. I'm finally stepping out and seeing the world with my own eyes." He figured he'd better earn his way to travel, so he clenched the few coins in his pocket and squeezed every last one out. The only path an adventurer can take, one that lets his wings unfurl and his magic run wild, is the road he chooses. First, Noi ripped himself away from the lands of Aldheim and pushed toward the nearest guild of adventurers. He flicked a glance at his old family estate and silently thanked his father for everything, no matter what it was. Spinning around, he took off at a sharp sprint. While in the office, Glenn was busy bragging to his father about how he managed to get his brother expelled. The Lord gave a quiet nod, took the news in without a flicker of emotion. Glenn flashed a smug grin, promised to sort everything out, and then launched out the door like he had no time to waste. Father ripped himself away from the papers, went straight to the window, and stared out into the distance for ages, like something down there had his whole heart in a vice. He hissed so softly the words barely reached the air, determined to stop his son from dragging their family name through the mud. Relief washed over his face as Noah marched straight into brand new challenges. As he strode forward, a wild storm of anxiety and thrill churned inside him about the unknown ahead. In that loud, packed shopping district, the whole world felt alive, and he stopped for a quick breath to take it all in. A wave of people crowded the place, cracking jokes and haggling nonstop, while Noah greedily devoured the whole colorful hustle with his eyes. Kramer waved him over, dangling a taste of that legendary sandwich, because that young man barely ever stepped off the estate. Noah thrust a gold coin into the seller's hands, and the man immediately apologized, asking if the kid came from some rich family. Then Noah just smiled and said that coin was all the wealth he had. Still stunned, the shopkeeper snapped out the count, 99 silver coins, then shoved the treats straight into your hands. In the merchant's eyes, a terrifying idea sparked. Maybe this was the punishment for an Aldheim exile, and Noi just gave a quiet nod, accepting her new fate without a word. That day, Noah marched up to the cart parked by the road and demanded the driver's destination, and the driver didn't even look up from his work as he said they were headed for Levelop. Then he asked Noah if he wanted to ride along. The boy halted for a heartbeat. Levelop was in the eastern lands in Wyda's territory, but soon enough he slipped over a few coins and climbed into the cart. That carriage always felt mysterious to him, almost romantic, and he knew it was the perfect spot to kick off a brand new story. Inside, a handful of men sat up and stared at the newcomer, their curiosity blazing as they watched him step in. Noah greeted him and threw out a quick apology for the surprise. Then the man just nodded back, silent as stone, zero hostility, so the cart rolled on. After a bit, one of the passengers leaned in and asked why Noah decided to head to Level Up. Then Noah said he was chasing the Adventurers Guild because he needed to earn money. The man flashed a smile and said the city was finally going his way. Then Noi leaned in and listened like her life depended on it. He kept going. This town used to be broke, so folks fought back by turning the dead, dry fields into fertile ground with fertilizer. Then he snapped his gaze to Noah, stunned. The boy turned out to know the city's past like he'd lived it, even though everyone else had long stopped remembering, and when I asked how, he said he'd devoured every bit of it from books. Edgar stepped forward, introduced himself, and basically said, "Most people have no idea about Levelop." Then he leaned in and warned that every single person in this carriage is a merchant, right down to the bone. The other guy grinned and added that he could totally tell Noah about his wild adventures back when he was young. Noah practically lit up and nodded along, and the moment he agreed, the other person jumped straight into the story. As he listened, Noah realized real experience hits different because some lessons you can't read your way into, you've got to live them. He couldn't believe it, he was right here, in this carriage, surrounded by living stories. Suddenly, the cart slammed to a halt, and the driver craned forward, fighting to see what was waiting up ahead. The horses started freaking out, and Edgar blurted out in pure fear. He couldn't even figure out what was happening. Everyone leapt out of the cart, and right up ahead they saw another cart sitting there, stalled and waiting. A hulking monster loomed beside him, roaring so hard the ground shook like it was about to split open. With fear blazing in his eyes, Edgar shouted that a demon had struck down a foreign cart. Another guy leaned in and said, "This is the Wind Tiger, an elite monster that almost never shows up around here." Noi got it instantly, this was absolutely an exception. Since another cart's crew had already clashed with the monster, they backed off, refusing to step in and risking everything getting even worse. They rushed back to their cart, and Edgar blurted out an apology, telling them that showing up would only stack more bodies and raise the casualty count. Noah shot back, dead certain he was going to help anyway, no hesitation. Everyone spun around, wide-eyed. How the heck are you gonna help? This is suicide. Noah thanked them for looking out for him, then said there was no other choice, so he launched himself out of the cart. He got zero support from anyone, and that crushing loneliness carved a scar deep into his soul. Now it all clicked. These people weren't different from him at all, and they absolutely deserved a real shot. With his flawless soft landing skills, he touched down on the ground safe and sound. He spun around, told the carriage to keep going, and thanked them for the wild stories. The cart vanished into the swirling dust, and the monster's roar blasted even harder than before. Noah got slammed by the monster's crashing roar, whines battering him straight toward the deciding moment. Noah knew the windy tiger was the deadliest thing up in the clouds, so he launched himself straight into the air, ready to throw down in a duel that played right into his hands. As he stared at the warriors below, memories from old books hit him hard. The beast had to be slammed and pinned to the ground, or it would slip and strike with full freedom. That tiger hung in midair, muscles coiled tight, ready to unleash a brutal leap on whoever was below. Noah unleashed wind magic and shot upward at breakneck speed, grabbing control of the moment before anyone could blink. As he closed in, he sprinted around the monster's jaws, snapping it toward him so it couldn't bite the people behind. He pushed the predator straight onto himself, and somehow it actually worked. The tiger, obsessed with aerial brawls, snapped its fury onto the young mage the very second it turned. Because of that, the earthlings snatched a few precious seconds of peace and the perfect chance to slip back and retreat. When the beast surged at him, Noah snapped aside at the last second, panicking as he hunted for one perfect chance to land a fatal hit. He'd never unleashed ancient offensive magic in a real fight before, and now there was literally nowhere to run. The guard yanked a sword into his hands, but Noah couldn't grab the blade in time. Crack, it slammed onto the ground. His heart hammered in his chest, but he shut his eyes tight and poured himself into the mysterious rune's power. The tiger froze for a split second. Right then Noah shot his hand forward and let the charged energy burst free. A purple flame erupted from his palm, wrapping the monster in a dazzling, shimmering ring. Giant runes exploded across the sky, and a blazing stream, hot as a dragon's breath, smashed into fur and flesh, devouring everything in its path. The monster shrieked, burst into flames, and then crumbled into dust, ash drifting down like silence settling over the ground. The hooded girl cowered behind the guard, and when that weird purple flame burst to life, her eyes went wide in pure shock. Once the flames died, Noah dropped down the moment it was safe, spent to the bone, but that heavy relief settled in his chest like it finally made sense. He stepped up to the girl and the warrior, and with every ounce of gratitude in his gut, he accepted their heartfelt thanks for all the lives he'd saved. With a shaky apology for the delay, the young man snapped his head away and murmured that he had to go right now. Noah was already spinning away when he heard her shout his name, begging him to wait. She stalled for a breath until the guard behind her promised the horse was perfectly fine. Then they finally set off, and the girl just nodded like she'd been waiting for permission to move. The moment she looked away, Noah snapped his magic on and vanished into thin air like a mirage. She spun around, shocked, but the young man was already gone. Then the girl snapped to attention. Standing right in front of her was probably some legendary magician, yet his face felt way too familiar. Meanwhile, Noah was already planted on that rocky ledge, and a wild burst of magic had launched him there in a single, unstoppable leap. The transfer drained him to his bones, but then, boom, something warmed his heart. For the very first time, someone thanked him for real, and it felt totally strange in the best way. Noah thought back on his old worthlessness and the road he carved to sharpen his power to decipher, and then he grinned, full of confidence. After a hard-earned rest, he set off again, chasing his next big chance to grow. While out in the highlands, huge things were about to explode. Lord Gildigan dipped his head to the guest, thanking him for enduring that long, brutal journey to reach his lands. Claudia hit them back with heartfelt gratitude for the warm welcome and those generous invitations. Claudia, this young beauty, is the kingdom of Rastai's second princess. Glenn stood shoulder to shoulder with his father, staring like he'd been punched, because when he laid eyes on the princess, pure beauty hit him like lightning, and he immediately swore she was destined to be his. Hildegand looked at it more pragmatically. Glenn marrying Claudia would only tighten the family's grip, and he could only pray their son wouldn't bring shame. Smiling, the Lord said he was relieved they made it safely. Then Claudia sighed because a wind tiger had attacked them, a beast of the highest class. Dazed, Hildegan could only stare and ask how they'd survived. The guards tried to slam the princess with blame for running off without permission, but before they could, she blurted the truth. She was sick to death of palace life, craving freedom with every heartbeat. Admitting she'd messed up, Claudia told the truth, because the traveling mage snapped into action and blasted the tiger apart with one fierce burst of purple fire, saving them all. The Lord froze in shock. This spell doesn't exist in modern magic, and not a single known sorcerer can match that kind of power. Claudia beamed and said the mage was polite, rocking dark hair, and a stubborn spark that burned in his eyes. Staring at the Lord, she leaned in and whispered, "His name is," then snatched the words away, leaving the name hanging there like a threat. When Noah's name hit his ears, Hildegan jolted, dark hair, mysterious power, the same omen, yet he brushed it off, refusing to believe that the clumsy kid could possibly wield magic. Claudia said she'd name-dropped Noah at the reception in the Rasta castle, and the Lord just turned red, then refused to give her a straight answer. After a quick pause to think, Hildegan declared loud and clear that there was no Noah in their family and that Glenn had always been treated as the eldest son. Glenn grinned like he owned the world, bragging that he was a fire mage too and that he was perfectly built for the air role. The princess shot him a cold, indifferent glance, gave him the barest nod, and made it painfully clear that his words didn't impress her one bit. With a respectful bow, Claudia told him she'd delay the marriage question until she came back, because she needed to dig deeper into the Aldheim family's affairs first. She spun around and strode off, and those guards trailed after her like they didn't know what to do, while the Lord stared on, worry etched all over his face. He knew that if word got out the elder son had been expelled, the family's honor would take a permanent hit it could never wash away. The Lord brushed off the guard's apology, then demanded Noah fast, because he knew he had to drag him back before the princess locked in her final decision. Staying by his son's side, Hildegan declared he was heading out on a journey and ordered Glenn to run the estate in his place. The second the door shut, Glenn shot up in indignation and demanded what was going to happen to his dream political marriage and that stunning bride. Noah stood there staring up at the legendary guild of adventurers, the one he'd only ever seen in his wildest dreams. For the first time, he finally saw her in the flesh, and his heart hammered joyful beats like the future was about to explode with new possibilities. Heart hammering, he scanned the building's front, built up his nerve, then knocked and muttered an apology before stepping inside without being invited. Inside, the adventurers were buzzing. Someone grabbed the newcomer and told him to register first, while the hall erupted with urgent tasks everyone was rushing to handle. In the middle of the room, a girl stood blazing with urgency, shouting for volunteers to rush straight to the Levelop volcano right now. She just reported it, an S-class monster Fafnir has shown up, and Lady Siren is already scrambling to tame that fire-breathing dragon. The adventurers froze because this beast wasn't just dangerous, it was a direct threat to all of Rastai, and panic was erupting by the minute. Some people pushed for a fast rescue right away, but others snapped back that with their strength involved, it would just blow the losses even bigger. Someone reminded them that Siren is the strongest in the guild, but that's exactly why you don't leave her alone. Because the girl was shaking in tears, blaming herself, and Noah instantly knew this was really bad. Noah snapped to attention at the deadly threat, and the big question hit him hard: should he personally march to the volcano to back up Lady Siren? Moments later, he slammed his decision down. He was charging straight to Levelop Volcano to tear Siren out of danger's grip. The whole hall went dead quiet at once, and the receptionist girl stared in shock, blurting out what rank of adventurer he was. Still reeling with embarrassment, Noah confessed he wasn't registered in the guild yet, and that he didn't even have an official title. The silence crushed the air, and he finally understood why they couldn't trust him. There was no adventurer certificate to prove he belonged. With one half-step already behind him, he felt the whole deadlock debate tighten, growing louder and more intense by the second. And I heard how everyone talks about Lady Siren with this desperate hope, because if she falls, it'll be disaster for all of them. After sizing up Fafnir's power, Noah realized the brutal truth: if he left the sorceress alone, he was dooming her and the whole kingdom. After sealing that win against the Wind Tiger, he couldn't shake the belief that those ancient runes would crush the dragon too. With a heavy sigh, he finally snapped into action and bolted right away, before it was too late. At that exact moment, on the searing incline of Labor Lupa, Lady Siren faced Fafnir and clutched her sword with white-knuckle intensity. She still couldn't figure out how a giant dragon ended up here, but she refused to back down. The monster hauled itself up the wall, and its nostrils spat out clouds of infernal heat that surged forward in brutal waves. The very next second, the mountain shuddered under a savage roar, and flames burst up in every direction. Fiery waves roared down like an avalanche, blasting the slope with a shower of burning sparks. The siren roared with power so brutal she couldn't hang on alone, yet despair still hadn't fully crushed her. Right then, Noah popped up beside her, no glance behind him, then fired, "Is Lady Siren ahead of me?" and hope flared bright in her eyes. Dazed out of her mind, she blinked hard, trying to figure out who this dark-haired kid with that confident voice even was. Noah didn't waste a single second. He snapped a giant amethyst rune into the air, and it erupted in brilliant radiance. The rune flared and became a glassy shield. When the dragon blasted a torrent of fire, the barrier swallowed the flames and left everything untouched. Thick smoke swamped the arena, hiding the world except for the barely visible silhouettes of two daredevils and a rampaging dragon cutting through the haze. Noah finally felt Fafnir's real power, and it clicked instantly. This is why it's an S-class threat, because even absolute fire can't touch that level. Serena held her breath, locked eyes with Noah, and demanded what incredible miracle he just pulled out of nowhere. She snapped to attention and blurted, "Wait, who are you? How did you get here?" Noah flashed a quick smile, introduced himself, and straight up said he'd come here to forge himself into a real adventurer. Without a second thought, he charged straight at the dragon while Serena screamed, "Do!" because to a beginner this was basically suicide. In the next heartbeat, the young man hurled a roaring wave of runic energy straight into the monster's chest. Fafnir got shoved backward by the blow, and his roar tore out of him, shocked, then seething at the sheer nerve. Noah went still. This attack hit way softer than it did when he fought the Wind Tiger. Suddenly, a booming voice shattered the air, demanding his name and straight up asking if the dragon itself stood before him. Noah stared at Serena, baffled. She gasped in shock, asking if she'd really called him a monster. The same voice kept droning on, calling Noah man, then grilling him about what his magic was really all about. Fafnir himself was the one speaking, fresh out of a seal that had lasted for ages and already seething at the intrusion. In Noah's head, a wild mosaic snapped into place. Wait, was he seriously talking to a dragon this whole time? The monster barked out a horse laugh, then finally admitted it never expected anyone to talk to it at all. Noah stared in total confusion, and Fafnir confessed he'd been thrown off just as much by meeting him like this. The young man shot off an apology for his reckless attack, swearing he never meant harm neither to the dragon nor to the people. Fafnir snorted through his teeth, convinced they were back again to trap him behind another seal. Noah snapped back. Serena was out to wipe out the fire dragon, and he stepped in fast to shield her from a fight she never stood a chance to win. Noah made sure he wouldn't cause a single bit of harm, and then, right when he thought it was safe, the dragon narrowed its eyes and demanded if it could truly trust his words. Serena heard that weird conversation and blurted out, "Wait, are you saying Noah's really chatting with Fafnir himself?" She straight up admitted she can't understand a single word. Apparently it's an ancient language of monsters. Noah grinned and said, "We speak an ancient dragon tongue, only the chosen can understand it." Fafnir let out a heavy sigh and admitted he'd once been reckless, so the world locked him away for centuries, but Noah felt that good heart still burning inside him. The dragon even laughed and claimed he was herbivorous, like that somehow meant he'd never cause a single shred of destruction. Serena's still reeling, because even a harmless dragon is a threat to the kingdom, and nobody's letting it rest in peace. Then Noah leaned in and told Fafnir to sign a servant contract, so he could shield himself from any fresh attempts to throw him back behind bars. The dragon snapped in shock and demanded, "Are you really ready to become my master and my protector?" Judging the young man's heart, Fafnir finally nodded, struck a deal and went, "All right, let's make it official." Noah didn't even hesitate. He whipped intricate runes through the air, and a blazing light surged across the slope, stirring the wind like it had a pulse. Air currents whipped together into a roaring spiral, yanking dust and ash into the air like a storm. Through the pounding storm, Serena barely managed to see it. This rune-lit glow surged around the dragon, wrapping it like a living spell. When the wind finally died down, she snapped to it. Fafnir had signed the deal, and Noah now owned his power. The dragon, shrunken to just 1/5 its size, perched on the young man's shoulder and quietly flicked its wings like a secret coming to life. Fafnir grinned and admitted the ritual was way easier than he'd predicted. Noah was a straight-up real monster when it came to raw power. Serena stared at his tiny form, and Noah told her the contract keeps shrinking the servant on its own. They passed the mic back and forth to introduce themselves, and finally the princess got to talk face-to-face with the dragon for the very first time. Fafnir purred with pure relief, thrilled that nobody could spot him and trap him again. Noah, practically glowing with joy, declared he'd snagged not just a servant but a true friend, and the dragon happily agreed. Within hours, the guild hall got swarmed by adventurers, their jaws on the floor after hearing the mission was finished so fast. Grateful adventurers closed in around Serena, panicked for her safety, and one girl, tears shaking in her eyes, blurted out that she felt responsible for everything. But Serena's gentle reassurance landed softly. It all ended well, and there was nothing left to fear. Noah watched from behind, grinned at how much his help had paid off, and slipped quietly out the door. Rushing up to him by the door, Serena fumbled out that her guild report only bragged about the mission's win. No dragons mentioned at all, and Noy simply nodded, thanking her for that careful warning. When they asked the kid where he'd spend the night, he admitted he was nearly broke and would probably just sleep under the open sky, while Fafnir, sitting on his shoulder, shrugged like it didn't matter at all. Serena beams and warmly invites them both to her place, promising a cozy roof and a mouth-watering dinner while she brags, proud as can be, about her culinary skills. As evening fell, the table at her place groaned under the dishes that instantly sent the guests' animal instincts into overdrive. Noah savored every bite and blurted out praise, and Fafnir, eating right beside him, went wild, flapping his wings and backing up every word with his own excited affirmations. Serena grinned like a proud hostess, kept piling on the food, and watched her friends dig into dinner with pure joy. Between playful praise, she blurted out that she was still stunned by Noah's look, like he just rose from the ground, and with one flick of his rune, he controlled the dragon. With cheeks burning, Noy blurted that it was all ancient magic, while Fafnir huffed in disgust, claiming the attack hurt like crazy, so the young man immediately bowed and apologized for his carelessness. Serena leaned in and demanded to know if he truly wanted to be an adventurer, then promised she'd personally help him register at the guild tomorrow. Noah happily nodded along, but when he called her Lady Serena, she cut in and demanded he use her first name instead. He blinked in surprise, nodded along, and she brightened up to say she could go without a name if it made things easier. Then morning slipped in without anyone noticing. Inside the guild, Noah grabbed a questionnaire, tore through every section with laser focus, and then filled in every single field clean and neat. He flipped the page and suddenly got the answer. Was Fafnir truly his official assistant? Noy just shrugged at the dragon and nodded, confirming it was official. The clerk shot a suspicious look at the little creature, and Noah quickly shook his head, telling him everything was exactly how it was written. He strapped Fafnir a collar stamped with the contract symbol, so the townspeople wouldn't spot him as some wild monster. The dragon, basking in peace with narrowed eyes, thanked her, and Serena realized that the accessory fit him like it was made just for him. Noah leaned in and whispered to Fafnir, telling him to sink a rune of strength into the metal so it could survive when he finally returned to his true size. Within minutes, the clerk rushed back to the trio, blurted out an apology for the holdup, and started getting ready to announce the registration results. The girl behind the registration desk snapped an apology for the delay, guided them straight into the talent evaluation hall, and as Noah stared at the door, the sting of his past test came roaring back. As Fafnir strode down the corridor, he caught the tension in his friend's breath and pressed him. Turns out, Noy had admitted that this very procedure once ended in a crushing, humiliating defeat. Inside the room, a burly man with round glasses greeted them with perfect manners and gestured the young man to sit right across from him. Carl, the guild's chief assessor, stepped forward and said his name was Carl. Then Noah shot a quick intro and braced himself for the inspection. Carl slammed a crystal ball onto the table, and inside it threads of energy crackled and shimmered, yanking the young man's curious stare straight in. In the blink of an eye, the assessor shouted that Noah had a rare gift for deciphering, and Noah snapped his head down in stunned surprise. Then Carl finally admitted it. After 10 long years of work, he'd never once laid eyes on power this insane in this field. Noah froze in shock because the very gift his father had condemned turned out to be an extraordinary power, one that deserved real respect. The assessor said the decoder's talent only comes once every generation, and it can flip everything the world thinks it knows. He gently nudged him toward a calmer life, but Noah just smiled and refused. Those wild, risky adventures didn't scare him one bit. Noah burst out of the office, sighing like he'd finally let the pressure go, while Fafnir grunted like, yeah, this gift from fate was absolutely worth bragging about. Serena marched them to the quest board and told them straight up, if you're a beginner with rank F, start by hunting down simple resources first. Noah picked a job in the eastern forest, snagged 10 healing herbs, and the prize was 4 silver. The dragon demanded to know what they could buy with that money, and the young man burst out laughing, 4 giant sandwiches worth, while Serena shot for caution in her head. Hunting for shade under the old trees, Fafnir realized one brutal truth: digging up the right plants inside that wild thicket was going to be anything but easy. Noah shot back with total confidence, you don't need anything fancy, just the right tool and your full focus. He shot his hand out and slammed the material detection spell into place. Right away, the herbs began to glow with a gentle light hiding among the greenery. The dragon stared in stunned disbelief, whispering that this was a miracle straight out of ancient legends. While Noah ripped off another leaf, he quipped that the ancient magic writers deserved all the credit, not him, and Fafnir just nodded along, pleased. They hauled themselves back to the guild with bags bulging, and right there, Serena and the clerk were already setting up to take the finished quest and figure out exactly what they were owed. Right there on the table sat a massive basket, packed tight with freshly gathered herbs. Noah told Serena that besides medicinal plants, he'd packed a few useful spices too, and Serena just smiled and nodded like she already believed this plan would work. Carl leaned in with a magnifying glass, staring at the stash, and couldn't wrap his head around it. How the young man had piled up that much rare herb in barely any time. He spotted those Panaceo magical herbs, each one collected in flawless, impeccable condition. As Noah stepped closer, the assessor declared his first task finished perfectly, and Noah flashed a grateful smile, thanking him for the massive praise. Carl blurted out his confession with real awe, shocked that a simple decoder could pull off something this incredible. Noah, cheeks burning, stammered that he was a total beginner, but Carl cut in, most newbies take half a day just to scrape together even a third of a harvest like that. Curious, the assessor leaned in and asked what quest the boy was plotting next. Noah just shrugged, admitting he hadn't picked one yet. Carl let out a heavy sigh and laid down a special assignment. Noah bowed low, then nodded and promised to hear every detail. He leaned in and stretched the parchment out, making it crystal clear that this young man could be a huge help to the guild if he took on the search quest. Out in the eastern forest, there's a rare magical flower nobody can afford to miss. Go in at rank B, and if you pull it off, you'll walk out with 5 platinum coins. Carl leaned in and said that this flower held the secret to the elixir of life. One sip could wipe out even the worst sicknesses, while Noah remembered the old legends about a potion so powerful it could do anything. When he saw his rank was only E, panic hit hard, but the assessor leaned in and said, relax, once you get a recommendation it's allowed, you'll bear every risk yourself. Confused, Noah blurted out, why are you pushing this so hard, Carl? Because the stakes were sky high and the fallout could swing any way. Then the assessor finally spilled the truth. His daughter is trapped in an incurable illness, and the doctors can't do a single thing to save her. With a heavy sigh, Carl kept going. He'd begged the best healers of Levelipa and none of them could help. His last shred of hope was the elixir of life. He's already scored the panacea, the holy water, and mermaid tea, but that same impossible flower only shows up once or twice a year. Lately, nobody's been able to find her, so Carl pins all his hopes on Noah's incredible search ability. Staring the young man straight in the eyes, he made it crystal clear he's the one paying for this quest, and for him this is life or death. Carl can only pray Noah won't turn him down, because if he steps in, he might rescue his daughter from that relentless disease. Taking one deep breath, Noah felt how heavy the request really was. Then, even with the danger staring him down, he stepped up and accepted the challenge to save Carl's daughter. He realized this sickness was mostly a job for medicine, but he also knew ancient magic could still touch its magical side. Before they went to the flower, Noah insisted on checking Carla himself, and Carl breathed out in relief, inviting them over after work. The broken man burst into the hall, shouting Carl's name like his life depended on it. He sprinted up and told Lady Carla what had gone wrong, and the moment Noah, Serena, and Fafnir laid eyes on him, worry hit them all at once. Carl came barreling home so hard he nearly ripped the door off its hinges. while Noah stayed right on his heels, tracking every move like it mattered. Right when they got home, a frantic Sarah rushed them inside and shoved them into the room where the doctor was slumped over, totally helpless, hovering over the unconscious girl. Sarah told everyone that Carla suddenly face-planted, and the medic just shrugged, totally baffled about why it happened. When Noah asked for words, the doctor snapped his interruption in, but the young man stayed cool and insisted anyway. He pointed to a curse called hardening of the magical meridians, a purely magical sickness that regular medicine can't touch. Noah told Carly that the mana keeps moving through the body nonstop, and if the channels get blocked, consciousness slips away. Then he gently touched her and poured in a calm, steady stream of energy. The kid added, "Yeah, it eases the symptoms for now, but real healing only comes from the elixir of life, made from that very same flower." Noah promised he'd dash for a flower right away, but the girl's breathing finally steadied, and Serena snapped that the sky was turning dark, making it too risky to go alone. She demanded to go with him, and Carl tried to warn her about the search artifacts, but they had zero time to waste. Serena warned that the locators wouldn't make it in time, and Noah shot back, fierce and certain, he'd tracked down the flower without any tools at all. The couple lit up with gratitude, blessed them, warned them to stay safe, and then rushed out into the night. Noah triggered the spatial jump, stretched his hand toward Serena and barked, "Hold on even tighter." With a blinding flash, they vanished for good, and the anxious estate was all that was left behind. Chill air from the eastern forest swept over them, the giant trees casting long shadows as Fafnir hovered close, ready to tear into the hunt. Noah slammed the rune of perception into place, hunting the tiniest flicker of the flower's aura, and just like that, their deadly mission finally kicked off. In a blink, they were thrust deep in the forest, and Noah shouted that they'd keep sprinting, kicking off a frantic hunt for the materials needed to get their hands on that legendary magical flower. He spun toward Saren and asked if she'd mind training some cross-country, and the girl just grinned and nodded. Then Noah hit the acceleration and his feet ripped off the ground. Two friends shot through the trees like arrows, slipping between the trunks while wind whispered and leaves rustled behind them. They knew one thing for sure, that magical flower only blossoms where the air is thick with concentrated mana. Fafnir perched on his shoulder and blurted out that this place had belonged to fairies for hundreds of years, so why wasn't a single one anywhere to be seen? If fairies plant the flowers and they suddenly vanish, then someone snatched them, because something way worse than you can imagine is going down. Suddenly, Serena snapped tense and yanked her sword free. She'd felt some strange presence in the air, and the dragon even praised her sharp instincts. A shadowy figure burst out of the thick gloom and came charging fast between the tree trunks. A colossal monster burst out of nowhere, a trident-shaped horn blaring from its head as it roared so loud it rattled your bones. Serena snapped her sword up in a flash, locked into a fighting stance, and stood ready to slam back at the incoming strike. In the blink of an eye, she charged in, and with one devastating swing, she cleaved the monster clean in two. Fafnir tore up the sky in a roaring whirlwind, blasting a non-stop ribbon of fire that melted what was left and scorched every threat before it could breathe. Noah just stood off to the side, eyes wide, staring at how fast and perfectly they moved. He admitted he never even saw that monster slide in, then he grinned and said it was straight-up perfect teamwork. Serena flashed the dragon a wink with a sly smile like, "Yeah, newcomer, you've still got a lot to learn," and Fafnir chimed in that fighting skills aren't guesswork, they're a whole different kind of science. Meanwhile, the sky churned darker and darker, drowning the forest in smoky twilight as shadowy slashes stretched between the trees. Serena snapped, worried because they were still without the flower. Noah shut his eyes and strained to the silence, and somewhere in the air he finally caught a faint echo of mana. He jabbed his finger deep into the thicket like he had a hidden compass, and they launched after that flickering inner signal. At last the trail spat them out onto the calm surface of a secret lake, ringed by shimmering silver willows. Serena knit her brows, staring at this rare flower sprouting right here in the most unlikely spot, like the secret hiding in plain sight. Staring at that eerie spot, Serena demanded to know why a flower would grow here. Then Noah snapped back that it wasn't an aquatic plant, but the mightiest whirlwind of mana was pouring up from the bottom of the lake. Fafnir snapped his head toward the sound, and there it was, barely their fairy magic. Noy nodded and said the flower's search signal was coming from that exact same spot. Serena let out a heavy sigh and nodded she'd explore the area even if swimming wasn't her strong suit, while Noah stepped up because this job mattered more than his fear. The girl yelled, "Wait," but the young man only grinned like, "I'll check the area," then he stomped straight onto the water like it couldn't stop him. A clear cocoon of air burst around him, flaring like a glass bubble that sealed him off from the cold surface. Noah slid under the surface and dove like a fish, pulled by some invisible current no one else could see. On the shore, Serena let out a deep sigh, impulsive, sure of herself, because it felt like the element was watching his every move. He hit the detection again, straining to feel ancient energy humming through the silt like a living pulse. Right at rock bottom, a dark clump shimmered to life, its aura snapping against the calm, still sand like a threat. Fafnir asked what it was and Noah's eyes widened. He recognized the spatial rift, a rare echo of ancient magic. The young man leaned in and said, "These portals knit distant worlds together, but who forged this one is a mystery you've gotta see on paper." The dragon realized that only fairies can pull off that kind of magic, so when they vanished, the fracture must be the reason. Noah reached out to step closer, but an invisible barrier slammed into him and threw him back like he'd hit a stone wall. Fafnir urged them to punch through the shield with fire, but the moment the flames kissed the water, they died out completely, like they'd never existed. Noah refused to quit. He demanded a heartbeat of time, then focused hard and summoned the runes of destruction in the palms of his hands. Mana's light blasted through the barrier, and it finally split, sparks exploding in the air like shattered ice. Right then, the dragon snapped its attention to the young man, and Noah's eyebrows shot up with shock like he couldn't figure out why it suddenly changed targets. Fafnir let out a fierce warning, something's creeping out of the darkness, and now it's time to jump in and earn some real battle experience. Squinting, Noah strained his hearing and caught the whisper of mana and the dull thump of footsteps pounding under the water. In a blink, he snapped his eyes on the direction. Then a creature crawled out of the darkness and the lake's gentle ripples shuddered like a siren screaming that danger was coming. Noah's eyes went huge as he clocked the danger, because that monster had slipped up right behind them. From the lake's shadow, a colossal sea serpent burst up, its fangs flashed with rage and its jaws hungered for blood. His body wrapped around his friends in a tight spiral, like it was moments from snapping shut and gulping down any prey in a single bite. Noah and Fafnir went still, weighing their next move. The beast's eyes blazed with hatred, and its scales shimmered with a venomous, hostile glow. Even with that deadly ring bearing down on him, the young man didn't flinch. He stood his ground like a legendary hero frozen in time. He couldn't believe it. Some sea creature had somehow moved into a freshwater lake, miles away from its ocean home. A furious dragon bellowed that some mindless intruders had shattered his hard-earned peace. He grumbled through his peaceful sleep, until, out of nowhere, people started rummaging underwater in the dead of night. Noah realized the monster could speak its kind's language, and it even dropped that chilling phrase, "the spirit of darkness." When he questioned the serpent, it snapped that some spirit yanked it straight out of the deep sea, but it had no clue about how or why. The young man flashed his gratitude with a steady voice, hanging right next to those deadly, predatory teeth. The serpent stared in disbelief at the mortal's fearless nerve, and Noah calmly said it was the decoder's gift that lets him understand any language. He lifted his hands high, insisting he didn't want trouble, and demanded they let them pass. The monster smirked like it knew the punchline. Eating uninvited guests was way simpler than pretending to listen to their desperate pleas. Noah felt the tail cinch down on him again, but he snapped his heavenly step on and tore clean out of the stone loop, then launched into the air. Fafnir snapped his wings open and barked at Noah, "Don't you dare stall, I'll take the serpent on myself." The young man tried to speak up, but the dragon snapped, "Carly's getting worse by the minute. This flower is needed right now." Noah pressed his friend's scale to his lips, and right then he swore to come back. No words, just pure gratitude. He soared over the lake as Fafnir got left staring down the enraged predator, face to face. In the young man's chest, one thought thundered. Every single minute without the elixir was stealing Carly's life. Suddenly, the sea serpent's fangs flashed and whistled past Noah's face, missing him by a hair. The predator snapped its jaws at the boy, but Fafnir slammed into it right away with a blazing whirlwind. After the searing hit, the monster gagged, snapped into a defensive stance, and the dragon roared nonstop to keep it from charging forward again. Noah made sure Fafnir had the dragon locked down, then bolted straight for the spatial rift, because a flower was waiting there just out of sight. He had no clue where that portal went, but one thing was crystal clear: his target was right on the other side. In a flash, the young man slammed into a brand new world, only for that familiar ground to dissolve under his feet. The blinding sun spilled over that weird landscape, like it had been ripped straight out of another dimension. A silent forest towered all around him, and Noah instantly felt it. He hadn't just stepped into a new place, he'd stumbled into a whole different time. Then it hit: this place is a pocket of ancient magic, and the usual rules don't stand a chance here. Suddenly, muffled sobs and a shaking whisper about captivity rose from right behind him. When he looked back, he found a terrified girl on the ground, clutching her knees like she was trying not to break. As Noah closed in, he clocked scratches all over her body, then he laid his palm down and poured healing energy into her. Her eyes bulged open, those wounds had already sealed up, the pain finally eased, and she barely scraped herself upright. Noah hurriedly apologized for the surprise touch, then admitted he'd used healing magic. With a grateful nod, she thanked him, popped back with a dazzling smile, and revealed she was a fairy, then stared at the boy human in stunned disbelief. He introduced himself as a brand new traveler and bragged that he has a rare gift: he can decode languages others can't even crack. The fairy nodded, finally getting it. Noah had been speaking to her without any barriers at all. She told me that long ago her people roamed the Levelop forest, until a bleak spirit burst onto the scene and swallowed the peace. A shadowy entity snatched up the fairies and slammed them into a twisted pocket of reality, cut off from everything. So if he finds that magical flower and shatters the seal, he'll have the one shot to save the entire fairy community. She told him the truth: only one fairy was still free, while the rest were trapped inside a towering ancient tree prison. Noah stared in shock, baffled by why the spirits of darkness had grabbed the fairy and what they planned to do with her. The girl didn't get it either, but she could feel it. This wasn't just run-of-the-mill captivity. When she asked, he snapped back that he was hunting a magical flower, the kind that could save a girl whose illness was crushing her. The fairy grinned and told Noah that real magic flowers bloom right here, then dropped onto his shoulder and flicked her hand like, "Come on, follow me." They charged toward the giant trunk, and right there, like they'd fallen into tar, the exhausted fairies hung totally still. Their wings quivered and their power slipped away. The dark cocoon clamped down so hard that even the tiniest movement couldn't happen. Noah lunged in rage, but the fairy yanked his sleeve and snapped, "Step too close and the attacker will pop up instantly." From the shadows, a bronze golem erupted, trident-horned and blazing, with a burning core roaring in its chest. The girl leaned in and said, "It's a forest guardian staked out here to guard the woods until the spirit of darkness comes back, and anyone who barges in gets torn apart without mercy." Noah finally understood it. If he wanted to free the fairies and get the flower, he'd have to smash that giant himself. He swore to the fairy he'd rescue her sisters, then ordered her to duck and vanish while the fighting raged on. After thanking him, she vanished into the treetops, and the young man was left alone staring down the stone colossus. Noah studied the golem like a lock waiting to be picked, spotted ancient runes seared into its chest, and knew they had to be rewritten. Only first, he had to pin the monster in place. He snuck up from behind, but the golem felt the mana spike and whipped around, then barreled straight ahead, smashing through any chance to dodge. The giant stomped one of the rare flowers, and ice-cold dread hit Noah. Time was slipping away fast, like seconds from disaster. The giant clamped onto the young man with iron hands, then hurled him skyward like a cannonball fired from a catapult. The fairy shrieked in pure terror as Noah's body plunged from the sky. Luckily, those ancient runes stitched into his cloak drank up some of the impact, but he knew one thing for sure: another hit like that would end him. As he soared through the air, he slammed the trajectory chain into motion, retooling his flight midair and lining up a brutal counterattack before that giant even had time to react. The earth slammed toward them at breakneck speed, but Noah already had his move. He'd shatter the golem's runes and save the flowers with the fairies right beside him. Noah hit the trajectory chain, twisted the falling strike out of the way, glided over the ground like it was nothing, then sprang again, spinning right around the golem. He snapped to the truth: he couldn't let that monster keep crushing the precious flowers that save lives. The young man shouted absolute fire, and a roaring storm of flames surged up and slammed into his bronze body like it was reaching the heavens. The flame just scorched the surface, but it left it unbroken, no cracks, no damage at all. Noah's blood went cold. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The flames only nuzzled the golem, yet its metal scales stayed unbroken. I snapped to it: "This guard is way stronger than I ever guessed, like it's built from something far beyond regular stone or wood." The boy didn't hesitate, he switched tactics and fired the magic shot straight into the heart core. The fairy shrieked in terror, her fragile heart quaking for the brave soul who'd taken that reckless leap. Then the golem slammed its heavy fists down on the young man, and that hit promised instant death. A rough paw shoved him hard, and Noah got hurled through the chaos like a stone caught in a raging storm. As he hauled himself upright, that busted rib let out a nasty creak. Turns out the enemy's shell was the real deal solid metal. Braced against the rocky outcrop, he frantically ripped through options for an escape, because his magic simply bounced right off like water skittering off oil. Mithril blankets this giant hole, an incredible metal that barely even flinches at magic, not even from the highest-ranked sorcerers. My chest felt like it was caving in, those beloved runes were useless, and time was sprinting toward the end. Before him loomed an enemy armored in mithril, an almost unbreakable wall, a fortress made to shrug off even the strongest mages. That's why the guard became the fairy's worst nightmare. No simple spell could ever break him. The giant cocked its massive fist for another devastating strike, and Noah stared at every twitch, already locking onto the one chance he had. Those massive fingers snapped shut on the gap, like the punch was meant to land right on that guy. Noah went for a spatial jump to vanish, but the seconds kept slipping out of his grip fast and cruel. Noah got caught in the moment, a fist slammed into the ground, exploding the rock in a violent burst. Debris blasted everywhere, and he was thrown back hard, buried under dust and sharp fragments of stone. The giant didn't give Noah a single breath. His next shield fragment strike smashed into Noah's chest like lightning carved in stone. Everything snapped to silence, then the fairy gasped in terror when the young man crumpled to the ground, choking on pain. Noah slumped on the cold ground, and as his strength drained away, numbness crept into every one of his limbs. An iron fist was surging up toward him, one more punch, and the mission dies with his life. Through the dust-stained starlight, he sank his eyes into the runes on the golem's chest. Scrubbing them clean was his only shot at victory. Escape is a dead end. Once that guard is still breathing, the fairies are doomed and that flower stays locked away forever. Teeth clenched, Noah pushed himself to his feet, every move slicing him with searing pain. There was nowhere to hide. If my gift were combat, flashed through my head, then it hit me. This decoder power isn't just for decoding, it's a weapon too, only the kind that strikes from a different angle. He staggered hard but didn't hit the ground. Ancient magic slammed down like thunder, yet the mithril shell turned it away, and somehow his spirit refused to break. Noah sucked in a deep breath, shot his palm up and shouted, "Absolute flame!" Then those ruby runes ignited in the air. The pillar of fire charged ahead, then slammed into the armor, and all it managed were scorching, dark furrows with zero real damage. He snapped to it right away. The formula had to change, or even the purest flame would just sit there, looking pretty and doing nothing. I plunged into my memories, hunting through ancient symbols I translated late at night for any clue I could use. His fingers carved a brand new pattern through the air, blending runes of destruction with runes of splitting like a deadly signature only he could create. Magic poured from his palm like living mercury, blasting straight into the creature's core as if he were gripping the monster's very essence. I can't fall apart here, the thought hammered inside her skull. If she didn't win, Carly would lose everything. No medicine, no way out, no salvation. Suddenly, his strength crumpled like someone yanked the mana out of his veins. An invisible band tightened around his lungs until he couldn't breathe. Those blazing lines faded and a cold weight clamped his chest. His energy source was draining faster than he could even stitch the spell together. It felt like the magic that had just surged through him was suddenly yanking loose, slipping away and dissolving into the air like it couldn't betray him fast enough. Noah snapped to it, his strength was tapped out, and if he didn't invent a new move fast, that avalanche of bronze and mithril would bury him for good at the bottom of this forest. A sudden hit of weakness crashed over Noah and he dropped to his knees again, his strength draining away like water slipping right through his fingers. Colossal, furious jealousy surged through him, and he suddenly ballooned in size, looming over the young man with a terrifying shadow. The bronze giant towered over him like a brutal stone mountain, looming to obliterate every living thing with one savage sweep. Noah stumbled, gasping at the ears of grain, while the fairy screamed his name in panic, horrified out of her mind. My vision sank into darkness, my consciousness snapped out and my body turned unruly and heavy like I'd been filled with lead. That steady hum suddenly died down into a soft rustle, like someone right beside him was flipping through ancient pages. Before his inner vision, a massive tome burst open, and its ancient glyphs glowed bright yellow from deep within. The book dripped primal magic, every symbol throbbed like the world's power itself was trying to talk through the pages. Around them, there was no land and no sky, just endless ether, floating like a planet-sized secret where this handwritten universal library hung in silence. Noah scrutinized the section on the composite that mimics mithril, and then it hit him: this is the key to victory. It spelled out the protective spell formulas, shoved them past their breaking point, and even traced it all back to the spirit of darkness as the one who created them. Even if no one knew why that book popped up right now, those words grabbed you so hard you couldn't look away. Those fingers brushed the light of the glyphs, and his mind burned with one goal: rewrite the true heart of Mithril's anti-magic. The message claimed Mithril drinks in magic only when its crystal pattern stays the same, so No didn't play nice. She twisted the lattice and let the energy slip right through. Eyes locked in, he rewrote the symbols, swapping the runes of absorption for the runes of resonance, and pulling a brand new formula straight into his hands. The force roared to life like a waking dragon, and with one final flash, the tome collapsed into a wash of shimmering light. On the cover, the title * Code of Transmutations * blazed for a split second, then the pages crumbled and vanished into thin air. A real sound snapped into his ear, the fairy's wings fluttering, her excited cries yanking Noah back to life. A tiny creature flapped its wings right above him, yanking at his cloak collar like it could hoist him up, while it shook with pure nerves, fighting to stay airborne. Sweat-soaked and dazed, Noah mumbled if he was still stuck in this world, clawing his way back through broken flashes of consciousness. Suddenly, the whole world seemed to stall. Then the golem roared, surged forward, and slammed its massive fist with brutal force. Noah came flying in at crazy speed, but the little fairy darted in and yanked him aside, buying him just enough time. When he finally came to, the young man gasped, because the one who had dragged him back from death was this tiny, fragile creature. With gratitude blazing in his eyes, he promised her everything was under control, but the fairy only shook her head sadly. She jabbed at the giant, charging in without mercy, its massive plates glinting as it closed in, primed to swing again. Despair clawed at her voice as the fairy drove Noah forward, insisting, "This enemy can't be beaten, we have to fall back." He couldn't tear his eyes from the bronze figure, and memories of the goofy Codex of Transmutations came flooding back. He snapped a blazing barrier around the fairy, barked at her to disappear, and suddenly a wild, strange confidence surged through his chest. Noah realized rewriting the laws of reality would demand impossible strength, but he still decided to gamble everything. He shot his palm up and his heart went berserk with panic, because the giant was already lifting his hand for the killing strike. No retreat existed, just that tiny spark of hope in his eyes, holding the line as his final fortress of resilience. The young man leaned in and hissed the formula, trusting the fresh runic scheme to at least numb the armor's strength. A raging stream of flame slammed into the guard's chest, clawing for the ancient symbols that powered his protection. Noah didn't come to destroy the giant at all, he just had to smash the runes to crack that unbreakable barrier. The outcome blew past expectations. Right before it could even swing, the golem shattered into dust like a cheap clay toy. Everything went silent. Noah froze in place, staring at that massive hole in the armor where just a second ago the supposedly invincible core had been throbbing. The fairy gasped in total shock, shouting that something impossible just happened. Reality itself had bent to the will of man. The young man stood in the wreckage, stunned out of his mind that this new formula's power could twist the whole world so violently. Guard pieces were scattered underfoot, and that brutal fight ended fast, pure victory. That mysterious codex question wouldn't leave his head, but Noah shoved it aside, because fairies were waiting up ahead and that long-awaited flower was finally within reach. Noah leaned in and pried the rusty cage bars apart, letting the cold metal bite his fingers. Then the latch gave a sick creak and the door swung wide open. The second the lock clicked, a blinding swarm of fairies exploded into the air like a whirlwind, and the very first one the young man saved shot upward fast. She chirped, "I can't believe it, I actually get to see everyone alive," and her emerald eyes lit up with pure, wild joy. Smiling, Noah felt a wave of gratitude surge through his chest, warmer than any fire could ever be. That shady fairy leaned in and hissed, "You're a human," but the friend shot back with total confidence that this boy was trustworthy. Noah's eyes locked onto a fresh spatial fracture under the giant's roots, like the way back was already waiting for him. First things first, flowers. The young man dropped to his knees and tore through soft turf, layer after layer, digging with pure urgency. Sweat dripped down his temples as the fairies held their breath, tracking every jittery twitch of his hands. Broken petals lay scattered, and despair clenched the soul like an iron golem's grip. "Why am I here if I'm not keeping my promise?" The shout echoed into the grove's dark, swallowed by the rustling leaves. Behind him, wings whispered in the air. The rescued fairy pressed a trembling hand to his shoulder, and the heartbreak in her eyes mirrored every bit of his despair. The darkness kept piling on, and even the fairy's soft little lights started to stutter and flicker, like the night was hungrily eating the last bits of light. Out of the lake surged the serpent's giant head, and Serena clung to every anxious ripple, eyes wide with dread. Fafnir narrowed his eyes and grimly realized the beast was breathing in the power of darkness, way stronger than anything it looked like. Serena felt the dark spirit's grip creeping in, but she still clung to one fearless thought: Noah would come back alive, carrying that flower. The dragon beat himself up for abandoning his friend in a strange dimension, and painful doubt clamped down on his heart. Suddenly, a calm voice crept in behind her, familiar, warm, like dawn breaking after the storm. "Sorry I'm late," Noah blurted as he came into view, already looking wrecked, soot-streaked and running on pure exhaustion. Serena flinched at once, peppering him with questions, her gaze hunting for any sign of hidden wounds. Noah gave a calm nod, "Just scratches," and Fafnir let out a heavy sigh of relief, silently swearing loyalty to his master. Noah jabbed at a nearby spatial rift and said he just crawled out of it. Then Serena snapped, frantic, demanding what happened to the magical flower. With a heavy sigh, he confessed he couldn't track down the specimen they needed. Noah spotted the terror in her eyes and promised her there was still hope. Then he yanked Fafnir to take them to Levelop right now. The dragon nodded on the spot, and the young man admitted with a tired grin that he had zero strength left to teleport anymore. The three of them clambered onto Fafnir's back, and the beast blasted into the sky, roaring straight for the city ahead. Mid-flight, Fafnir fidgeted and demanded to know if they were really safe without the flower, while Noah calmly flashed a confident nod. Suddenly, the young man roared into the empty air, demanding that his invisible listener come out, and telling him not to fear the friendly dragon. Shocked, Fafnir demanded, "Who are you talking to?" because the world around him sat in eerie, breath-stopping silence. Noah leaned in and hissed, "Move now. If you hesitate, it'll be over before you even realize it." Meanwhile, Carl, his wife, and the doctor stayed up at Carla's bedside because her failing health just wouldn't loosen its grip. He leaned close and whispered to his daughter to hang on tight, swearing that Noah would come back with the medicine. Suddenly, the girl jolted her eyes open and jabbed a finger at the flickering light dangling from the ceiling. Carl couldn't stop thinking about the delirium until a tiny fairy's winged silhouette drifted down to the bed, graceful as a dream. Sarah stood frozen, her breath caught as that glowing being tenderly brushed her daughter's face. The fairy greeted him softly, and her voice drifted through the room like a light summer breeze, wrapping everything in warm magic. She leaned in and told Carla that miracles were right around the corner, then said Carla better thank Mr. Noah for that hope. Then she spun to her parents, locked eyes with them, and declared with iron certainty that it would all turn out fine, shattering every last shred of their fear. Stunned, Carl stared out the window, and his heart nearly stopped from sheer amazement. Above the city rooftops, a familiar dragon streaks through the dark sky, riders riding its back like a roaring promise of hope. Right with him, a wave of light surged in, burning through the darkness and lighting the way to a miracle. The sky shimmered with 1,000 tiny fairy lights, twinkling and swirling like a glittering star rain. Hundreds, no thousands of magic sparks erupted in the night, blazing like living fireflies and vanishing just as fast. Carl blinked, then out of nowhere, ancient legend creatures crashed into his hometown. Noah, Serena, and Fafnir stood shoulder to shoulder, and joyful fairies danced overhead, like the whole moment couldn't possibly be real. Meanwhile, those mysterious magical flowers that had baffled everyone for ages suddenly burst into bloom across the entire earth, all at once. With Noah's freedom, the fairies burst back into the world and showered it with the blooming power of nature like a living gift. Fafnir swallowed his shock and rasped that he never expected less from an ally bound by a contract like that, and Noah just smiled, like it was obvious, saying it was time to get the elixir ready. Years of grueling work on rare ingredients paid off. At last, the elixir of life was finally ready. Carla, trapped in the curse of meridian hardening, gulped down the potion, and watched the agony and weakness drain out of her body. The girl threw her arms around her parents, tears of pure joy glimmering in her eyes, and Serena watched the whole heart-melting moment with a soft, gentle smile. Stunned out of his mind, Carl strode up to Noah, fought to keep his feelings in check, then bowed so deeply it looked like he'd fold, thanking him with all his heart for saving his daughter. Noah, burning with awkward nerves, pleaded for them not to bow. He wasn't doing this for praise, he was doing it to help. Mom leaned in and softly told Carly the truth. Noah was the one who gave her a brand new life, and Carly thanked him with all her heart. Embarrassed, Noah stared at the family warmth he'd never known, and jealousy and sadness clawed at his chest. He realized those kinds of embraces would always stay out of reach for him, but he refused to dim someone else's happiness. Noah told Carl it was time to move on, and the host's eyes went wide. He quickly begged everyone to stay for dinner. The young man hesitated, but Carla burst into happy claps and swore she felt amazing, then confessed she was craving a juicy burger. Carl grinned and told Serena and the others to jump in, and the sorceress said yes without hesitation. Fafnir, acting all proud, snorted that even with that terrifying look, he'd never turned down white apples, then busted into a huge laugh. A fairy whirled above their heads, sniffing the dishes like it was discovering treasure, then nodded eagerly and agreed to dig into those human delicacies. That fairy stared at Fafnir with sparkling eyes, and Noah's chest suddenly filled with a warm, strange glow that felt impossible to ignore. He glanced around at everyone there, people, fairies, and his loyal dragon friend, and suddenly it hit him. They'd all been stitched together by the same shared story. Serena in an apron was whipping up dinner with Sarah and Carla, and that warm, cozy moment hit Noah so hard he broke into tears. Because he finally understood it wasn't about blood, it was about family he'd built with his own hands, through every brutal trial that came before. Soon everyone piled around the table, Carla beaming with pure joy, chatting nonstop, and somehow her excitement caught fire in everyone else too. Noah finally realized this quest didn't just end with him, it was finished by every person who'd survived these brutal 2 hours of danger right beside him. Right after he finished weaving the barrier, the young man planted himself in the forest, because now that dark spirit would finally be locked out. He leaned in and told the fairies, "This magical shell wraps the whole grove tight, and no shadowy darkness can ever break through." One fairy beamed at him, smiling sweetly as she thanked Noah, and straight up called him an incarnate deity for their entire people. The young man's face flared red as the fairies zipped in a circle and clasped hands in prayer. Then a warm tide of gratitude washed over him from head to toe. Right before Noah and Fafnir left, the fairies begged them to come back more often, and the young man snapped that he'd return the very first chance he got. Later, deep in the guild hall, Carl's voice went heavy as he announced that Noi's mission success earned her a promotion, and he thanked everyone for the trust and unwavering support. When Noi saw that massive reward, he froze in disbelief and blurted that he should use part of the coins to get Carla more treatment, but Carl snapped back. The money was earned the right way, so the boy deserved it. "Don't turn it down," he urged, "this is your merit." Meanwhile, adventurers stacked into a loud line inside the guild hall as fresh quests were shouted out. Noah clocked a massive crowd gathering, and Serena told him why. A famous archaeologist from Ludolf had just rolled into the city. A scholar hunted down battle-tested adventurers to crack the eastern ruins, and that news hit Noah like a shockwave. Serena clocked his interest and fired off the truth. His gift for cracking ancient languages made him the perfect pick. That nearby intermediary girl burst out in pure despair. She'd been hunting for a specialist like this for ages, and now she finally knew she'd lost it. She said, "I got back from Ludolf and I couldn't find a single person with the right skills. No, this wasn't for some random newbie, we needed someone special." The moment the crowd heard the proposal to nominate Noah, an instant approving murmur rippled all around. In the crowd, someone jabbed a finger at Noah and shouted that he had a rare talent for deciphering. Yeah, he's a newbie, but he's already wowed the guild. The guest archaeologist shot her eyebrows up, demanded to know the boy's rank, and then pointed at the tiny dragon perched on his shoulder like, "So, what are you supposed to be?" Noah gave a shaky, awkward grin. He'd just been stamped with rank E, and now Fafnir served as his familiar under a contract of subordination. With a heavy sigh, she said, "So you're an adventurer after all, but you're not cut out for my expedition." She said you can't roll in with less than a C-rank team, higher ranks would hit even better. Carl snapped back. Even with his young rank, Mr. Noi pulled off a level B mission and the archaeologist just shrugged it off as pure luck. The hall buzzed louder and louder until Serena shot her hand up, her voice cutting through the noise as she demanded silence. She's basically saying, don't trust rank, novices can be geniuses, and Noah just proved it the moment it mattered. The archaeologist snapped to attention the second he saw Serena, the legendary A-rank swordswoman, and sprinted right up to her, shaking with excitement. Turns out in Ludolf they had fan clubs for the young star, and this girl wasn't just watching, she was one of the fans herself. Noah blinked at how strong and steady the name Serena sounded, and the swordswoman waved it off like it meant absolutely nothing. When the guest begged Serena to lead the expedition, she smiled politely and refused, then pointed right at Noah and said he was the perfect runes specialist. The archaeologist lit up. Now it finally makes sense why Serena backs that guy so hard. She teased that Noah was seriously handsome, and Serena snapped back right away, no romance, not here. At the same time, she checked Noah's talent and said it's truly one of a kind, backed by her word as an A-rank adventurer, then leaned in and asked if he'd finally gotten his mana back. Noah swore he was fully back to normal and ready to crash headfirst into whatever challenge came next. Then Serena blurted out the fastest proof, let's do a friendly match, and the archaeologist scoffed, saying a brawl between an E-rank and an A-rank sounds straight up ridiculous. Adventurers clustered in a tight circle, buzzing with anticipation, and Serena pushed forward, demanding she take the challenge. She promised to rein herself in and spar at full control, warning that Noah's ancient magic wasn't something to play with, it could get dangerous fast. With a grin, the warrior charged in, go on, decoder, hit me, and two sparks snapped at each other midair. Serena launched her swing, and the blade screamed through the air with a razor-sharp ring. In a blink, the strike crashed into her shoulder. She snapped her restraint into place even if the pain still screamed, and Noi nodded hard, swallowing her groan. Just as Serena geared up to repeat the incident, the guy vanished out of nowhere and reappeared at her side, like a shadow slipping free from beneath a beam. Seeing how fast he reacted, she flashed a smile and confessed she'd envy the way he could soar above the ground. Noah roared, my turn now, and the flame in his outstretched palm surged thick and hungry, swelling into a scorching cloud of heat. Serena felt it hit, absolute fire. She already knew those purple flames were pure danger, so she snapped into a dodge before they could touch her. Hell's stream erupted in a roaring surge, then stopped in its tracks, sealing Noah inside a sizzling wall of heat that shimmered like living fire. The warrior girl gasped. 1 second it was flame, the next it snapped into a barrier, sealing the boy inside like he'd been wrapped in a blazing cocoon. Her eyes flared wide. He's about to blow this up as a smokescreen and slip behind them. She spun around and found nothing but empty air. Then, in the very next second, Noah was standing right behind her. Serena flashed a smile. She knew Noah had caught her move, then she seized the perfect moment with that spatial step. The adventurers' crowd burst into shocked cries, because nobody saw E-rank outplaying A-rank coming. The archaeologist, who noticed every single detail, couldn't hold her excitement back. This fight proved the rookie's real potential, way better than any speech ever could. Serena, squirming under the crowd's stare, confessed that the demonstration had stretched on too long, but the payoff was crystal clear. The girl swallowed her pride, apologized to Noah for that earlier disrespect, and then, straight up, formally asked to join the expedition to the ruins. Serena grinned and winked as she backed her recommendation, and Noah snapped up the invitation with a warm smile and a grateful heart. Before they knew it, Noi, Serena, Fafnir, and the whole crew were huddled on the bridge, bracing for goodbye, because time was sprinting past them way too fast. Serena gushed that their little trip felt like a fairy tale, brimming with wonders and wild surprises, while Noah admitted he'd learned more than he ever dared to dream. The warrior laughed, saying Noah might show up at the next meeting rocking an S-rank, and the dragon swore it would guard him on every road ahead. At last, the boy waved goodbye to little Carla and her mother, tucking his smile tight, while secretly craving that same warmth he'd fought so hard to return to them. Noah thanked everyone for showing up for him, and for the first time, it felt like he finally belonged to something that mattered. Then Serena lifted her hand to send him off. On the bridge, my friends shot their hands up and made a bright line of wishes, cheering all the way. Stepping back, Serena choked out through her tears, good luck to you, and it hit her, this moment mattered to both of them more than anything. Noi strolled down the forest path with this new acquaintance, nervously introducing herself as Yun, an archaeologist and magical mechanisms engineer from Ludolf's capital. Then Noi answered back, introduced himself, and with a proud grin showed off his familiar Fafnir. Yun studied the clever little dragon with wide-eyed wonder. Creatures like that are almost unheard of. Then the moment he saw how locked in she was, he just burst out laughing. Soon, they finally hit the vehicle, an elegant magical motorcycle that Yun was damn prouder of than anything in the world. She flat out admitted that that motorcycle is her pride and her favorite hobby, and Noi was completely stunned because he'd never seen anything like it before. Helmet strapped on, the archaeologist leaned in and asked if he was ready to launch, and the young man just nodded, buzzing with the thrill of a legendary journey, even as he grinned and joked that he could cut the trip short with a spatial step. The engine screamed and the motorcycle shot forward like a lightning bolt, tearing through mountains, fields, and thorny thickets while they gawked at every jaw-dropping view. Around the campfire, they paused and traded wild theories about the ruins' future mysteries, firing off dreams and daring plans like sparks. A few days later, the eastern ruins loomed ahead, mossy walls standing silent like they were guarding the secrets of a forgotten age. A shadowy passage beckoned him, and the second Noah stepped in, he knew these stones were hiding something far more than they ever showed. They didn't waste a second, stepping straight into the half-dark, burning with determination to crack the silent secrets left behind by the ancients. Yun swore he'd take on the role of his archaeology mentor, because ahead, cryptic mechanisms and deadly traps are just waiting to spring. She warned Noah that every treasure was ringed with cunning traps, so he went ultra-cautious, every step measured. Yun stepped onto the hidden plate and the corridor exploded with the shriek of metal arrows. Noi snapped up a protective barrier on the spot and every projectile slammed and bounced off the clear, transparent sphere. The boy admitted the warning was fair and Yun snapped back fast, then told him it was just a test to see how he'd react. They pushed forward and this time ropes dropped from the ceiling and lashed onto the girl, squeezing her tight like they had a pulse. The trap snapped shut in seconds and Yun's heart slammed as panic took over. He had no idea how to get out. Noah's eyes locked in as he got ready to move, because the true trials hidden in these ruins were only just about to kick in. Noah didn't even blink. He lunged forward, fired off a single burst of magic and ripped the ropes to shreds before scooping Yun up in his arms like it was nothing. He stared at the ropes clamping her down and knew it wasn't random at all. It was an ancient trap meant to cage her, and he'd just found the truth. The young girl, still gasping for air, finally managed to thank her rescuer. She laughed and swore she was finally ready to handle any trap that came her way. Noah hauled her down the corridor until they hit the next hall, and the moment they did, Yun snapped that he wasn't taking another step, while Fafnir charged ahead, cutting through the danger to clear the path. At last, they burst into the room where the next key to cracking the ruins' mystery was rumored to be hidden. Yun asked what came next, and Noi, eyes scanning the dark corners, swore there weren't any hidden traps. It calmed her for a second, but she kept watching him like he might vanish. Noah's eyes locked onto the wall, blanketed in bizarre symbols, and the young girl leaned in, practically buzzing with excitement. Could he read them? He nodded, then dove headfirst into decoding them. Those old records spilled the truth. This father was drowning in worry over his daughter, and the way she was acting was totally off for her age, which shocked Yun because he couldn't see how any of it connected to the ruins. Then Noi dropped the answer. Right in front of them lay a page torn from an ancient diary. They talked about the 20th year of the runic calendar, the time of water, the day her father finally taught his daughter magic, and now Noi jumps in. It's the 779th year by the same count, meaning more than 7 centuries have slammed by. This was the smoking gun that the ruins were built by a civilization that vanished into history. Then the father snapped that he'd have to battle the Turtle of Dreams, some mysterious beast, and Noi's mind immediately started racing, trying to figure out what that could possibly mean. They pushed on until they slammed into a dead end. Fafnir wasted no time explaining that every other passage had already been picked clean. Yun let out a heavy sigh. After all that traveling, they still hadn't uncovered a single worthwhile find. She leaped off his back and teased him, saying the old archaeologists had taught her something. Sometimes the clues are scarce in a ruin, so you've got to reread those inscriptions again and again until they finally talk. That's when Noah spotted a faint little sign on the wall, like the place was daring him to hunt down a specific book. Yun frowned and blurted, "Which volume are you talking about?" She yanked out her own notebook packed with diagrams and scribbled notes, but still nothing. Noah stared at that spot, convinced the book that spills secrets was about to show up right here. He clenched his focus and knew no more doubts, one more try, because if that artifact was going to appear anywhere, it was going to be right here. When he opened his eyes, the emptiness vanished. There it was, right in front of him. An open tome, and he couldn't help but exhale in relief because the one he'd been searching for was finally in his hands. Noah tore into the tome's pages and devoured every note, everything about the labyrinth, from trap after trap and their exact spots to the precise way to disarm them, plus a handy mini-map of the safe corridors. On one of the diagrams, he spotted a ladder hiding behind a solid wall, and the boy immediately slammed the book into real life, locking onto every detail he saw. Noah tweaked the spatial projection, and just like that, he erased the stone barrier and replaced it with painted doors, opening up a whole new path below. The moment he opened his eyes, the wall vanished and a fresh passage swallowed the horizon ahead, so wild it even left him stunned. Yun froze in shock, and all he could manage was a shaky whisper, "That can't be true, this is impossible." Noah shrugged, told her to drop the talk and keep moving, and as she finally caught her breath, the girl sprinted after him. The corridor burst open into a grand hall, and boom, soft light exploded across it as the wall torches sparked to life on their own, bathing every step in glow. Yun ran his fingers over the cold metal plates and stared in awe at the ancient light fire magic, and at how insanely well those alloy walls were built. She blurted that this material is stronger than anything modern, and somehow it's packed with tech too, turning the whole find into a jaw-dropping archaeological bombshell. Noah didn't even try to hide his excitement. Every step deeper made the discoveries feel bigger, like they were getting life-altering by the minute. Suddenly, both of them burst into the hall where a crystal mountain glittered under the ceiling, and right above it, a girl floated there, perfectly still in midair. Crystal light spilled over her like a spell, and the whole world warped into a perfect fairy tale dream. Yun's eyes snapped to what sat ahead, and she knew it wasn't a doll at all but some wild tech capsule, yet her tongue froze before she could say it out loud. Noah felt that brutal surge of magic and snapped into focus. This energy wasn't some lifeless prop, it was alive, trapped inside a real person, frozen in forced stillness. He tossed out the idea that the mechanism could halt time, and that's exactly why the girl looked like she'd been slammed into a perfect freeze. Seconds later, the words "access granted" blazed in front of them, and the machine hissed out steam like it had just woken up. Yun spun around, baffled, no clue why the device had kicked on. Then a cold rush of steam blasted from the ventilation ducts and wrapped them in instant coolness. Once the fog finally lifted, the sleeping girl started slipping downward, completely out of control. Noah snapped into action, lunged forward, and caught her a split second before she could crash to the floor. He cradled the stranger in his arms and felt a soft heartbeat and warm breath, like the ruins had just opened a whole new chapter right in front of him. Noah felt the stranger crawl back to her senses, as if her mind were piecing itself together from fragments. He spotted even the tiniest shift, panic spiking as he rushed to ask if she felt sick, and then, right from her lips, a barely understandable murmur slipped out, brimming with awe. She narrowed her eyes, snapped out in an accusing voice that she could understand his words, so that meant he was nothing but a lying demon. Noah didn't even get a chance to explain. She slipped out, flipped through the air, landed like a blade, and left Yun and Fafnir frozen in deadly tension. The stranger snapped into a combat stance, determination blazing in his eyes as he braced to strike again. Noah studied every twitch of her movements, and the more he watched, the more it hit him. This wasn't just someone alive, it was something ancient, something mysterious, standing right in front of him. Right then, the girl burst into song, and that melody sliced straight through his mind, striking the deepest, hidden strings of the soul. Fafnir roared like a storm, lining up a counterstrike, and Noah suddenly felt a tidal wave of power slam through him. In a blink, a brutal double blaze erupted between the fighters, two elements smashed together, ripping the air wide open. The fight exploded into brutal chaos, blasting scorching waves in every direction. Yun couldn't wrap his head around it. Someone else had taken hold of the absolute flame, and it was pure destruction. The heat kept climbing. She launched blazing bursts, and Noah pushed back hard, until an overwhelming surge slammed her off her feet. Then it hit him. Her words about language weren't a throwaway remark. She spoke an ancient dialect, and that fire burning in her, it was a living legacy from a vanished era. Right in front of him loomed a representative of an ancient race, an actual living relic from the days when magic was everywhere. Noah strode toward her, swearing he wasn't the enemy, and promising he just wanted to understand her. The stranger suddenly sprang up, hooked her legs around him, and cinched her brutal grip tight like a trap with a heartbeat. The young man clenched every muscle, yanking to break free, but her strength hit like a freight train, colossal and unstoppable. Fafnir snapped into his true form and blasted the girl aside with a crushing ram. She sprang back to her feet like the hit never landed, and dust glittered in the air around her like a wild magic trick. Noah took a deep breath and shot the dragon a grateful look, because if it hadn't stepped in, everything might have gone down in a lot more dangerous ways. Yun watched it all unfold, frozen in stunned silence, because what was coming next felt like a battle no human mind could even picture. Noah turned to the stranger again and blared, "We're no threat to you at all." The girl shuddered the moment she heard the ancient rune language, one breath of it and a cold sting crawled down her skin like it couldn't possibly belong in the modern world. She asked if he belonged to the rune tribe and Noah answered straight, no, but that only lit a whole new kind of curiosity in her eyes. Yun stared at the stranger and demanded a second to talk. She just nodded in silence, so Noi crept up cautiously like the moment might explode. He told her she was trapped in a capsule that froze time itself, and that with his decoder ability he was finally able to wake her up. Tears spilled down her face as she relived the war of people versus the so-called devils, clinging to the memory of how her father sheltered her, fighting to keep the last spark of their culture and magic alive. Noah stared ahead and realized he was face to face with a living legend from an age that's now just myths and whispers. She leaned in and demanded, "So tell me how many years went by." Noah shot back a reply so sharp and old-world it made her words feel like a lost relic, and it drained the color straight from her face. The girl went silent, and crushing loneliness swallowed her in a world that had already moved on without her. Hunting for help, she leaned on Noah and demanded he lead her to the Celestial Watchtower, an ancient tower standing right nearby. She leaned in and said the whole structure is forged with runes strong enough to outlast entire ages, and it's not finished until it sees this world with its own eyes. Noah spun toward Yun for help, and as he remembered that tower on the way over, the archaeologist nodded and agreed. With a snap of the spatial transition, they popped right up to the top, and Noah, now calling the girl Alexia, watched her eyes widen at his insane skill. Alexia stood at the edge, staring out at Kirkjia's endless ruins stretching forever into the distance. In her mind, she slipped back to the days when these lands were ravaged by war, when every old conflict came back as painful confessions. There used to be nothing here but stones, yet even now a huge emptiness where her homeland once was still tears open her heart. When it finally hit her, she swallowed her doubt, apologized to Noah, and thanked him for kicking open the truth. Noah asked, and Alexia quietly spilled the truth of Kirkjia, once a wealthy, peaceful kingdom where people lived simply yet stood majestic while they cherished a deep bond with nature. She jabbed her finger at the colossal stone hand and told me this. Long ago, her people's masters built a real handmade hand, a massive golem hammered together with ancient runes. Kirkjia's rune mages were so damn powerful they could shove back even the most nightmarish demons crawling in from other dimensions. Alexia asked, "So how many people are living in the world right now?" Noah paused, admitted he didn't have the exact number, and then said, "Yeah, it's countless." He added, "Maybe it's exactly because the rune masters paid that price that humanity dragged itself through the dark ages and rose to where we are now." The room went dead silent, and right then, without anyone seeing, tears streamed down the girl's cheeks because whole eons stretched between her yesterday and today. Noah realized the nightmare instantly. He woke up to learn his homeland was gone forever and he was stranded all alone. With a warm smile, he promised her, since he had the runes, he'd stand by her side and shield her from every danger. Yun, watching it all, choked back her tears and breathed out that the ancient people were somehow both gentle and noble. Noah's jaw dropped at the revelation, and he demanded to know where she even learned all of it. So Yun admitted she'd slipped Fafnir a request ahead of time to translate their conversation. She demanded that the meeting stay secret for now. Sure, protocol says she has to report to the king, but right this second her only priority is the princess's physical safety and her fragile state of mind. Noah stepped in and introduced everyone. He even labeled Yun an archaeologist with nothing but good intentions, just to keep Alexia from panicking. Yun gave her name again and Noi chimed in with his too, plus a quick nod to Fafnir. Then he leaned in and asked the stranger's name. She shot back, "Alexia," And Noah couldn't shake the feeling that the name rang like an ancient song. Then she stepped forward and told him straight, she's Princess Kirkshia and she's thrilled to meet him. November looked totally lost at the title, but Alexia just gave a sad little smile and said, in this new world, formal titles don't mean anything anymore. Yun, hooked by her words, begged for a translation right away and then backed the princess with full heart, clearly stunned by how amazing her story was. Alexia confessed that even after a whole century, duty and royal privilege still burn in her heart, and Noah flashed her a warm, encouraging smile. She cut the air with a confident snap that she trusts her own legs, and Noah chuckled, saying he's seen firsthand just how far a person can walk. The girl shot him a sideways look and he blurted that it was all a joke. Then he leaned in and told Yun they'd decided to hit the road on foot. Yun didn't see that coming, her eyes widened, then Alexia shut her eyes tight and a memory of her father surged back into view. She spotted him there, facing away from her, bidding farewell to his dearest daughter, then promising a long separation was coming. At that exact moment, her parents' faces and every last thing her people had built crashed back into her memory and her heart swelled with pure, burning gratitude. None of the younger ones even glanced back when she slowed down. Alexia just nodded once, then broke into a sprint to catch the squad. Meanwhile, in some totally different corner of the world, a mysterious creature seethed with irritation, hurling its rage at Noah for the delay. She was convinced there was no reason to rush. She just waited, totally calm, certain the creature was right on the edge of its long-awaited dream. Noah and Alexia finally arrived at Ludolf, the kingdom's grand capital, where ancient traditions and sleek modern style twisted together into one breathtaking skyline. Noah spun around in awe, unable to stop himself from gaping at the royal capital's sheer grandeur and jaw-dropping magnificence. Alexia, her voice tinged with heartbreak, admitted that even Ludolf still couldn't touch the beauty of Kirkshire. Right by the massive city gates, the whole world burst into motion, streets packed with people, everyone rushing about like there was no time to waste, a non-stop tide of movement swallowing them in. Alexia, not used to all that chaos, felt her hands start to shake and snapped her eyes down fast, trying to bury the panic on her face. She confessed to Noah that all those crowds, noisy benches, and constant chaos left her spinning. Everything felt far too new, and anxiety kept crawling up her spine. Noah's confusion didn't slip by unnoticed. He asked if Kirkshish felt any calmer, and Alexia nodded, apologized, and quietly reached for his hand for support until someone suddenly shouted their names. Alexia felt her nerves melt the moment she slipped into that cloak. Maybe the runes carved into the fabric were guarding her, warding off whatever trouble lurked. Before long, they stood face to face with a jaw-dropping mansion, an extravagant giant of a building with massive doors looming over them. The second Yun crossed the doorway, she blared, "I'm back," and a maid rushed up to grab her attention, handing her a cloak on the spot. She asked how the inspection went, and Yun answered in a few sharp words everything had gone just fine. Then she jabbed a finger at Noah and Alexia, announced them as guests who'd be staying here for a bit, and straight up told everyone to keep a special eye on Alexia since she was a total stranger. The maid bowed, swept right up to Noah and Alexia and offered to take their outerwear. Then Noah calmly told Alexia to slip off her cloak and the two handed over every last item they'd brought. After that brutal long journey, Alexia's head swayed with a dizzy spin and her stomach growled loud enough to confess the truth. She was starving. Yun flashed a knowing smile, no translation needed because lunchtime had officially arrived. One of the maids yanked out a chair for Noah and motioned him to sit, and honestly, he blushed at the attention. Then she leaned in and asked if he wanted any special dishes. Young Thomas jabbed a finger at one dish and declared it the chef's signature, and the whole room clinked greetings. Then everyone dug in with full hearts. Nobody clocked that Alexia wasn't rushing a single bit. She just sat there, calm as ever, until someone nudged her and told her she could finally start eating. She snatched up a fork, clenched her courage, and went for the dish they served. With a shaky pause, she drove the fork into the meat, and Noah and Yun leaned in, staring at her in pure curiosity. The young Yun barely managed a smile, naive, almost primitive, and weirdly charming all at once, until Alexia suddenly froze, realizing she'd been acting way too inappropriate. She set the fork down with care and blurted out an apology for her manners, and Noah just grinned at her, warm and reassuring, telling her she had nothing to worry about, especially after such a painfully long wait for the food. Alexia let out a quiet sigh, sadness tugging at her chest. Her father kept snapping at her for slipping up and she knew why, but she also understood royal etiquette was merciless, so she nodded and decided to finally learn refined manners. Noah wasted zero time. He jumped right in and showed them exactly how to hold a knife and fork, breaking it down step by step with real examples. As Alexia munched, he couldn't help but sing her praises, saying she was doing wonderfully. Then she nodded back like, "Yeah, this dish hits completely different when you really taste it." Noah grinned, ordered the maid to fetch him bread, tore it neatly in two with ritual precision, and then demonstrated exactly how to dunk the meat and veggies in soy sauce. After figuring it all out, he slapped together a clean, simple sandwich that still looked absolutely delicious. Curious but still a little unsure, Alexia tried to copy it, and Yun's smile lit up as she said it looked delicious, and promised she'd make one just like the one she made as a kid. She softly took Alexia's hand, steadied her step by step, and guided her to the bathroom with a warm smile, then shot her a kind, encouraging glance like, "You've got this, good luck." Yun was desperate to tell Alexia exactly what to do, but she could barely even grasp what was happening around her. Meanwhile, Yun jabbed a finger at the row after row of bottles lined up on the shelves, and Alexia just froze, totally lost, like she had no clue if they wanted her to pick one and use it. She remembered a simple magical cleansing in Kirkshish, and right as she did, Yun started lathering her hair like it was about to save her. Alexia stared, stunned, as Yun got swallowed by foam, then noticed those glowing bubbles pulsing hard on his side and couldn't stop herself from wondering why. Then Yun jerked her finger toward another bottle and squeezed out a little more of the product straight onto her skin. As Yun watched Alexia, he couldn't miss it. Her skin looked spotless, her grooming flawless, like she'd been born into pure noble blood. Alexia blurted out something, but Yun caught nothing of it, because without Noah, the one who usually translated between them, every word turned into a mystery. Yun was stunned when Alexia snapped that she was arrogant, and then claimed she was a princess from an ancient bloodline. Yuna caught it right away. Alexia probably hadn't meant anything insulting at all. Sure, her face looked icy, but that was probably just how she naturally was. So Yuna shoved the worry aside because it was only a shared bath, nothing to panic over. Soon they climbed out of the bath, swaddled in soft towels, then froze in front of a giant mirror. Yun held up a hairdryer to Alexia and grinned, bragging that it was a magical hair-drying device, until Alexia stared at it wide-eyed, convinced she just stumbled on a real artifact. Then she cast a spell and conjured warm streams of air that cradled her head like a soft blanket. Yun blurted out to Noah, asking if she could learn the ancient language all by herself, and Noah nodded right away, telling her her brains and hard work would get it done, and saying that ancient and modern can coexist as long as people speak with real sincerity. Alexia and Yun locked eyes and traded quick, warm smiles. No words needed, they'd already agreed. Noah gripped an ancient book in his hands, its pages blazing with symbols like time itself had pressed them in. Then he shoved it toward his father and declared he could read it because that gift inside him was real. At that exact moment, Noah snapped awake, chest hammering out of rhythm, sweat slicking his forehead, and that flimsy bed barely keeping him from spilling over, while Alexia slept like an angel right beside him. Alexia stared at what was on her plate, paused like she was thinking hard, then grabbed the bread first, and only after that, the white apple. She snatched a piece of bread, pressed it to her lips, and bit down. Then Noah froze in shock because her modern speech had suddenly turned way more confident. With a soft grin, he said it like it was nothing. Alexia matched his smile and told her, "Yeah, it's that simple, turns out he's actually a good person." Noah leaned in, asked if she was okay, and Alexia softly begged him to stroke her head, so he reached out and let his fingers sink into her silky hair. At that exact moment, his father's face crashed into his thoughts, and Alexia saw the shift in his eyes, snapping anxiously, "Are you okay?" Noah leaned in and promised her that everything was totally fine, begging her not to worry. Then, to snap his own nerves into place, he blurted out loud that they should head to the guild and get Alexia registered. Alexia leaned in and fired off, "So who are adventurers?" Noah grinned and laid it out, "Versatile workers who hunt herbs and square up with monsters," and Alexia nodded like, "Got it." He told her this kind of life would help her truly understand the modern world and learn how to earn for herself, and Alexia immediately snapped that she was ready. What mattered most was that he stayed close. Then Noah swung his attention to Yun and asked what she planned to do tomorrow. And Yun planted himself on the floor, eyes locked on that strange device, its glow weak but pulsing with magical symbols. Fafnir kept staring at her and spotted Yun's insane focus. While Alexia leaned in and asked what she was up to, Noah said Yun was crafting a brand new magical device and trying to funnel rune energy into it, and Alexia couldn't stop being impressed. Noah noticed Yun was totally swallowed by her work, so he ditched the idea of taking everyone and headed to the guild with just Alexia. After they said their goodbyes, they slipped out of the house, yanking the focus away from Yun's whole technomagical world. Alexia, still a little lost, stepped into the guild and earned her very first rank D, but even with how easy the whole thing felt, she couldn't shake the feeling that she came off awkward and talked way too quietly. Fafnir, watching every move, told Noah straight up, rank D is nothing for someone like him, he could climb to S in no time, but Noah shot back that promotions don't jump stages, they come bit by bit. Alexia stared at the chaos in the crowd and snapped that the noise had finally pushed her over the edge. Noah nodded along and they decided, let's get out of here. Right on the road, after a quick pause, Alexia suddenly blurted, so what gender is Fafnir really? Noah burst out laughing because that question hit him like a total curveball. Right then, something unseen slipped in behind him, only now did it finally reveal itself. Alexia went stone still, staring in disbelief. Right in front of her stood Noah's father. Hildegand calmly locked eyes with his son and told him to hold off on the talking, because Noah had to get home right now. Noah, totally stunned, protested that he was the one being expelled, but his father snapped onto his hand with a grip so fierce Noah couldn't wrench away, barked for him to shut up and shoved him to go. Noah tore free and screamed he'd never go back, he'd got another life and new responsibilities now, yet Hildegand only loosened his son's head, not his hand. Next thing you know, a fireball explodes in the sky and the air turns scorching. Then the father snaps that he'll drag Noah back if Noah won't return on his own. Noah begged his dad to stop, but it only spiraled. Fiery, round explosions started raining down around them like they were pouring out of some pitch-black abyss. This blazing rain was Gildigand Aldegime's signature move, the most savage fire mage their bloodline had ever birthed. In his hands, he held magic strong enough to tear the world apart or save it. Noah gaped at the swarm of fireballs, then a surge of power ripped through him, he snapped his hand up, and a blazing stream of flame tore out of his body. The magic awakening in him wasn't new at all, it was ancient and terrifyingly beautiful, drenched in purple mist like a majestic omen. Gildigand froze, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Right in front of him stood a sun blazing with ancient magic, and it proved Princess Claudia was telling the truth, so he demanded answers. Did Noah really uncover that ancient Greek power? And then it hit him, his so-called weakling of a son wasn't useless at all. He'd cracked those ancient texts and learned real magic, unlocking a power the old man never saw coming. The battle kept surging, growing uglier by the second, so Hildegand snapped in rage that Noah had finally clawed his way to the title of head of the family. Noah didn't even blink. With a cold, steady voice, he refused it all, no matter what they were offering. And then Noah snapped to it. His father never saw him as a real person, just a tool to chase ambitions, nothing more. Gildigand erupted again, roaring that in this family it wasn't about picking your fate, it was talent that mattered most. The Gimnoa are bound to be strong and they don't pass that strength along to anyone else. And for him, talent isn't some gift you receive, it's fate itself. Alexia didn't flinch at his stare, she shot back that if he kept going, somebody was getting hurt for sure, and she practically begged Noah to stop holding back, even if his own blood was screaming at him to quit. Noah finally grabbed the power he'd chased his whole life, stood in front of Alexia, and chose to face the danger head-on, protecting her with blood on the line. The ground ripped and shook under my feet, the air started quivering, and it felt like magic itself had burst loose, slipping out of anyone's control. Cracks ripped through the earth, buildings groaned as they shook, and the first brutal tremor jolted people to the doorway, every soul terrified, staring at the chaos like, what on earth is going on? Noah's father snapped a warning, escape won't happen, so stop even trying, and just like that he wheeled around and vanished, leaving Noah zero chance to get a word out. Noah watched his footsteps die out and his figure vanish into thin air with only a faint shimmer of magic lingering behind. Then he turned to Alexia, silent, grateful, and quick to apologize for how he'd acted. She didn't say a word, but that deep, thoughtful look told me she was still trying to piece together everything that just exploded in front of her. It was far too powerful, every second sparked a nasty premonition that disaster was closing in, and Noah couldn't quiet his own mind. And then, right from the east, An unimaginable monster tore into view, towering beyond belief as it lumbered straight toward the city. Ancient records carved into the ruins screamed of his coming, and that's how they named him the Dream of the Turtle, a creature born from dreams and older than history prophecies. Jan Reed's words hurled before the king's throne hit the hall like lightning. Every single person froze, terrified. Princess Claudia's scream shot through the air, but the king's iron will crushed it. Then he barked an order to mobilize every last soldier in the kingdom, determined to stop disaster before it struck. Right away, commands snapped into place: round up the knights, summon the mages, and call adventurers from every rank, starting with the very first. Yun tore herself away from the royal papers, spun to Noah and Alexia, and said, "The kingdom's whole strength is on the line. Honestly, even I can't believe this is happening so fast." Yana let out a breath of relief. Noah and Alexia immediately sensed the Turtle Dream's presence, and that thing was blazing forward at insane speed, racing for the capital in just 3 days, which meant the whole operation had to kick off 2 days from now at the eastern border. Yun told her she'd stay locked in the castle, building a strategy off what Alexia's learned, while Noah and Alexia could finally kick back at the estate and get ready. Alexia urged Yun to rest up so she wouldn't burn out too soon, but Yun just flashed a quick wave and swept off to her errands. With smiles frozen on their faces, Noah and Alexia got left alone, and that looming threat just wouldn't let up. The moment the door shut, Alexia felt the city swallow its own noise, and all that was left in the capital were warriors and adventurers, people who had to stand against the sleep of the turtle. The air crackled with tension, like the world was holding its breath. Then Noah blurted out that they should take a break to save their strength for the decisive battle, and Alexia nodded right along. They traded good-night smiles, then each one spiraled into their own anxious thoughts. Soon, Alexia stopped dead. Anxiety clung to her like a curse. She stared at Noah with sad, pleading eyes, then swallowed her fear and suggested they lie down together just to quiet her terror for a moment. When Noah caught Alexia staring at him, he couldn't say no, so they crawled into one bed, and soon Alexia drifted into peaceful sleep. But Noah stayed awake, trapped by a storm of thoughts that wouldn't let him rest. Later, a weird pressure clamped down on his clothes, like an invisible hand had just yanked his sleeve. It was Alexia. She clung to his sleeve with a death grip, like she was begging forgiveness and grabbing for protection. Then he finally spilled everything: his origins, the Aldegime family, the wizard bloodline that tossed him aside as worthless, convinced he had no talent at all, and Alexia just sat there, listening in total silence. She pulled in closer, terrified of the battle about to hit, and you could hear the fear snapping in her words. Because the sleepy turtle wasn't just any monster, and even in Kirkshish, nobody compared to it. Noah swore, eyes blazing, that he'd never let death take him. He'd fight for every last inch to win. Alexia nodded hard, soaking up his courage, and before long she was asleep again, snuggled tight against him. Noah said goodnight and glanced around. Alexia sat one way, Fafnir the other. The spot felt cozy, but the air still crackled with tension. The very next morning, Fafnir perched by the bed and roared like thunder, shouting for Noah and Alexia to wake up. Noah jolted awake, half-blind and half-dazed, and blurting questions. He demanded if the sleeping turtle's movement had changed at all. Then Fafnir shot back, dead confident that nothing had shifted. Then he blurts out that it's way past noon. Noah's eyes go wide, and he springs to his feet instantly. He threw on his gear at lightning speed, then realized they had to reach the garrison or they'd miss everything, so he shouted at Alexia to get changed fast, too. Alexia yawned, rose up, and began to peel off her clothes. Then Noah snatched Fafnir and bolted out of the room like lightning. When Noah and the others reached the garrison, he blurted out, shocked, how could Alexia sleep so peacefully before the decisive battle? Alexia just grinned and teased, oh, you mean like you snoring like a real pig. Then Fafnir chuckled and said, the only thing that matters is we're not late. A huge crowd of mages, archers, and heavy-armored fighters had packed the area, and when the newcomers showed up, nobody so much as looked their way. They had no clue that right among them stood the kingdom of Rasti's S-rank monsters, the elite tier, with only 12 of them total, and then Fafnir snapped his head to Noah and dropped a serious remark. He told Noah that slugging it out as a tiny dragon just doesn't work well, and there's no way he can switch into his real form around people either. Noah nodded like it clicked instantly, and yeah, Fafnir's worries were totally on point. Right as Fafnir vanished into the closest tent, Noah and Alexia stayed out in the open, staring at the dark, terrified of what might come next. When Fafnir came back, a sweet horned girl stood right in front of them, definitely not human but weirdly irresistible all the same. He told them that this human-looking form would let him blend into the crowd way easier. Noah was left speechless and demanded, "Why this one?" Fafnir just shrugged with calm confidence and said he didn't know anything about gender, he'd simply picked a cute look to keep people from getting suspicious. Right then, a girl rushed up to them and dropped the news: every adventurer had already been handed emergency strategic instructions. Noah snatched a sheet and started reading, dead locked in. Alexia leaned in and asked what it said, and Fafnir flicked his eyes over the words, then admitted he couldn't make a thing out of it. Noah finally finished. He declared that the troops were split into 3 main units. The first group was the Knights of the Rasti army alongside their magical unit, and they were thrown straight onto the front lines to clash head-on with the Sleep of the Turtle. The third crew was packed with court mages and S-rank adventurers tasked with holding down the cities, no exceptions, and when Alexia leaned in, worried and furious, she demanded why they wouldn't just strike first. Noah didn't blink. He said the smart move was letting the army call the shots. Those veterans are battle-trained and drilled to follow orders. In the third group's ranks, his father commanded, and that alone calmed Noah's nerves because with their units split apart, chances of crossing paths in battle were slim. Noah kept moving, and along the path of the turtle's dream, magical contraptions waited to stop the monster in its tracks. But even that didn't promise safety. The trap-like mechanisms would only drag the creature down, and fully stopping it would be near impossible. Alexia stared at the magical constructs, and the moment reality hit, she couldn't stop thinking, "Why am I going to face a nightmare like this?" Noah noticed her pensive look and immediately offered to carry her things to their tent, because tonight they'd sleep under the stars and a decisive battle was looming. Alexia only nodded in silence, then trudged after him even though exhaustion weighed her down. Meanwhile, Princess Claudia hurried up to Hildegard, thanking her for helping prep for the mission, then cringed and apologized for the brutal day. Hildegard answered with careful honesty that everything was okay, because he knew Claudia was still young, yet she had to carry the weight of a princess and even act like the king himself. Claudia confessed she was terrified for her father and couldn't stand the thought of anything happening to him. Gildigan suddenly went quiet, drowning in his own thoughts. Then it hit him. Noah's role in that emergency mission didn't leave Claudia cold at all. Maybe she's already starting to see something in him beyond just being a mage. Next day, Noah, Fafnir, and Alexia stood guard by the tent, completely geared up, battle-ready, and waiting for the fight to ignite. The warriors locked in their battle spots first, ready to meet the threat that was coming no matter what. The Rasti Knights snapped their shields up and locked into battle formation, ready to fight with zero hesitation. A sudden emergency op called Battle with the Sleep of the Turtle just kicked off. The moment the first shells screamed toward the monster and smashed into its hulking body, survival became a full-on battlefield. While the city raged on the capital's edge, kids cowered in a flimsy shelter under the vigilant eyes of women, and sheer panic hung in the air. A little girl tiptoed up to her mother and whispered, asking if it was really true, if some terrifying monster was out there trying to smash their home. Her mother flashed a gentle smile and promised her that the soldiers of Rastia, the strongest in the whole kingdom, would take care of it for sure. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead and murmured, "Everything's going to be okay." The girl only nodded in silence, but the worry still burned in her eyes. On the battlefield, the fights already exploded. Warriors snapped into action and fired a full volley at the dream of the turtle without wasting a single heartbeat. The shells slammed into the creature's massive body, but they barely scratched it. Its armor was insanely tougher than anyone expected. One soldier screamed in sheer despair that the shelling was useless, because the monster didn't even slow down, and the commander clenched his fists and barked for them to keep fighting, even as his own hands shook. Protective spells crackled in the air, and then the turtle snapped its colossal jaws wide, like it was about to swallow the entire horizon in one bite. That giant empty mouth chilled every warrior to the bone. Pure dread sliced straight through their souls like ice. Seeing the deadlock snap everything shut, the commander barked for a retreat back to the reserve defense line. That turtle didn't slow down for a second. It smashed straight through walls and ramparts, crushing every last shred of hope that anyone could stop it. When the monster surged toward the second line, the girl officer went deathly pale and screamed at the adventurers to get ready for brutal close-quarters combat. Noah, Alexia, and Fafnir stepped back as the soldiers strained and staggered, trying to hold off a creature twice the size of any monster they'd ever faced. The turtle kept rolling ahead, totally blind to the punches, while the once mighty fortifications finally started to split and crumble. The ammo was running out, the magical barrier started to tremble, and the predatory monster pressed harder than ever against its weakening prison. The commander spotted the disaster and choked out in agony, "This might be the end," while the soldier beside him barely managed a matching whisper as the ruins roared around them. With her teeth clenched, she snapped out one last desperate order, praying it would buy even a single moment. Warriors, driven only by thoughts of home and the people they loved, surged forward without a single moment to spare, even if it meant risking their own lives. Their blades and spells crashed down like rain, yet the turtle surged forward with ruthless fury, smashing everything in its path. Alexia couldn't stand to look, so she quietly whispered thanks to the brave souls who paid the ultimate price. She clenched her courage, leapt into the sky, and blasted out a surge of magic that lit up a radiant barrier, trapping the soldiers inside. That thick field slammed the deadly hit to a halt. Turtle grumbled as he smashed again and again, but the protective sphere refused to break. Fafnir roared right along with them, telling the warriors to pull back, then slammed up his weapon to supercharge the magical barrier. Alexia's dragon power fused with ancient runes, and for a split second the monster's onslaught froze, finally giving the defenders a much-needed breath. Noah caught the breakthrough and immediately snapped into action. Ancient magic flared, and a purple blaze lit up his eyes. In the next heartbeat, everything screamed decisive. The warriors' united courage and the trio's raw power were lining up to flip the whole battle. Noah shot a warning to everyone, "That turtle's eating the distance too fast, we've only got a few moments left." Alexia didn't hesitate for a second, she barked at the adventurers, screaming for them to retreat back to the reserve line right now. The soldiers froze in pure terror, then the truth hit them hard, they had to bolt right now or they'd drop dead where they stood. Noah kept his distance, never once taking his eyes off the monster, while rage and pain churned like wildfire inside him. Right in front of her, Kirkshisha lay in ruins, and the dead innocents stared back at her, including the people Alexia loved most. Then it hit her, turns out the sleeping turtle was the one that killed her father and wiped out hundreds more. Noah shot his hand up, and a violent whirlwind slammed into the air around him, like nature itself had heard his rage. Storm winds whipped harder and harder, feeding the power forged from the very core of his soul. The tornado roared ahead, straight toward the turtle, and Alexia and Fafnir stared in stunned awe and sharp fear. Noah cut through the storm and shouted that this creature had trapped Alexia in loneliness, alone, weak, and defenseless. In his hands, the storm blade ignited into existence, an expert technique that turns raw wind into deadly steel. He slammed his strike into the creature's shell, praying he'd crack it just a little. A tornado roared like a living beast, swallowing the monster whole as Noah stared on, and the hurricane only kept getting worse second by second. Once the whirlwind finally died down, a cold, creepy silence swallowed the scene, yet the turtle stood there, totally unhurt, like the chaos never even touched it. The armor still shone, unscathed, no cracks, no breaks, and Fafnir blinked in pure confusion as Alexia realized the beast had vanished completely, tucked away inside and somehow surviving the attack. Without flinching, the turtle stretched its massive head out in one brutal move, ready to unleash a deadly counterattack. Magical shots blasted out of the shell, like cannonballs screaming through the air as they tore forward. The charging magic slammed into Alexia's barrier with a thunderous roar, but her defense didn't budge. Noah only then realized the armor didn't just soak up spells, it bounced them back with brutal, terrifying force. He shot Alexia a look, voice tight and grim. "Yeah, their wild, roaring bonfire can be weathered, but no way you'll shatter the turtle just like that." When Noah reached for the Book of Tranquility, an ancient wellspring of magic, it hit him. If he wanted to win, he couldn't just fight harder. He had to rewrite the rules of the battle itself, or this creature would be untouchable. Noah whipped his head around, caught Alexia and Fafnir staring back, and knew that without their distracting move, his risky defense plan would crash the moment it started. Once he clocked his own plan, he knew he'd be hit with a brief drain, because the body couldn't survive that kind of weight and nobody had even sniffed out this weakness yet. In their eyes, ironclad determination burned, and in perfect unison they swore they could count on them. Noah tried to thank them, but right then disaster struck. Magic ripped through him from behind like a thunderclap. Still clueless where the punch landed, his whole body jolted and his ears screamed as the blast tore him forward. Fafnir snapped around, stunned. Someone struck them from behind so suddenly there wasn't even a moment to react. A magical blast hurled Noah skyward, but he clamped down on his teeth, fought to stay conscious and yelled to his friends, "I'm fine." With courage burning in his chest, he told Alexia and Fafnir to slam their hits right onto the turtle, before it could seize the upper hand. Noah sensed an invisible threat, snapped his head around, like danger was rustling in the air and begging to be found. A shadowy figure loomed ahead, Gildegand Aldegime, a father whose eyes blazed with pure rage and disgust. In Hildegand's hands, a ruthless blaze roared to life, and his icy voice crashed down with brutal threats, like he'd already chosen his son's fate. Just a second later, the father's eyes snapped to the ancient protective cloak sitting on Noah's back, an artifact from a dead age, completely alien to modern magic. Hildegand's expression turned ice cold, then, no hesitation, he whipped the flame into a blazing lash and threw it straight at Noah. As the burning fields tore past, Noah slammed down a tough surge of water, snuffing the flames out before they could ever singe his skin. He begged his father to stop, but with the capital reeling from disaster, Hildegand wouldn't budge. His resolve was pure stone. With a disgusting grin, he sneered that the city didn't matter and neither did the turtle. What mattered was taking his son, whatever the cost. Noah fired back with pure heat, but his father slammed up an ice-cold wall from the fourth circle, bam, shutting the whole attack down in an instant. When Noah saw that Hildegand could shut down even the combined attacks, he knew in his bones he had to ditch that plan and find a whole new way. He scrapped together every last bit of strength, then unleashed a razor-focused magical blast, praying it could crack his father's defenses for even one heartbeat. That blow slammed into the icy barricade and shattered it, sparks exploded everywhere, and the father and son duel reignited with savage, unstoppable fury. Rage swallowed the father whole as he bellowed for the flames to explode. He unleashed a 6th-level spell, and the air around them started to boil like it was alive. The space itself started to overheat, magic surged in brutal waves, and right from Gildegand's hand, meteor of lava erupted as a blazing sphere tore toward Noah. Their eyes collided while the spell's devastation roared around him. Noah kept his cold, steely focus locked in place, refusing to look away. With a thunderous roar, the strike tore a massive crater into the earth, but when the smoke cleared, Noah stood there unshaken. Bursting out of the smoke and rubble of the clubs, Gildegand burst into laughter. He sneered that this worthless talent had somehow matched the greatest magician of the era. With a grin, he called it a misfortune that this power would never fall to the Aldegheim bloodline, and a far worse disaster if Noah's exile secret ever saw the light of day. In his voice, a terrifying promise lurked. He'd risk everything, even his own son's life, just to keep his title. Yanking off his mantle, Hildegand roared that the final battle is here. Noah either drops to his knees or vanishes for good. Noah shot back in a low voice that he wouldn't turn back, and he'd never let them kill him. He yanked off his cloak and his eyes blazed with pure determination, because he'd sworn to Alexia he'd obliterate the sleeping turtle, and nothing, not even doubt, would pull him off that path. Even though he didn't want to clash with his father, it was already too late to turn back. This showdown was coming no matter what. Noah stared Hildegand down, and his unshakable courage hit like a hammer, so strong it rattled even Hildegand's nerve. Outrageous insolence, the father thundered, stunned that his own son had the nerve to challenge him. Noah just shot back, "It's over, there's no time left to be a father." In the next heartbeat, he vanished, teleportation so instant that Gildegand froze, completely stunned. He spotted his son casting spatial magic and erupted in rage, roaring, "No, I'm not letting you slip away. Don't get it twisted, I'm not running away," the voice snapped from right behind. Hildegand tried to spin around, but it was already game over. Noah was right there, standing within arm's reach. He sucked in every ounce of strength, lifted his fist, and slammed forward as ancient power ignited through him. Like thunder, I drove a devastating punch straight into my father's chest, sealing the outcome of their brutal duel. Hildegand took a brutal hit straight in the chest, crashed to the ground with a thud, and choked out a hoarse cough. Noah loomed over him, and the father, racked with pain, kept forcing a smile anyway. You demanded to know how much longer he'd keep clinging to the past, because if he doesn't snap out of it right now, every last bit of blame is going to land on him alone. Kneeling there, Hildegand shook as he choked out, "So you'll really murder your own father?" And yet, in Noah's eyes, ironclad determination burned steady. A razor-thin beam of light snapped into his palm, and right before Gildigan's eyes, a black void yawned open, gobbling up the last sparks of magic. The father's body gave out, slumping limp and helpless on the cracked ground like it had finally stopped breathing. Noah loomed over him in silent, stone-cold calm, barely moved his head, then turned his back and walked away without a hint of emotion. He muttered the fairy tale "someday everything will be fine" right under his nose, and that sweet promise came out laced with bitter, cutting irony. Meanwhile, Alexia kept a tight grip on the sleepy turtle, and her barrier flickered like it was barely holding on under pressure. Fafnir swooped overhead, blasting fiery rays straight into the giant monster's face. Seeing the girl's exhaustion, the dragon offered her a break, but Alexia pushed through and promised him she wasn't quitting. Just as the tension snapped to the breaking point, a shadowy figure came closing in. Both swung around at once. Noah was there, late as ever, and he murmured a quick apology like it still mattered, even with everything raging around them. He scanned the battlefield in seconds, then urged them to team up, because it was finally time to crush that monster for good. Alexia shuddered, darted a worried look at Noah, and asked in a trembling voice about his father. Then a crushing silence slammed down for a beat. With the faintest smile on his face, Noah choked out, "I don't have a father anymore," and the moment those words hit, tears lit up the girl's eyes like a warning. Fafnir didn't even blink, staring that turtle down as he snapped a warning: the monster is about to strike again. Noah didn't waste a single heartbeat. He shot his hands up and a barrier slammed into place like a fortress, smashing the turtle's devastating blast to pieces. But holding the line wasn't enough. He glanced at his friends and ordered them to yank the monster's attention, because he had to snatch a moment to find a way to crack that armor. The answer came instantly. Alexia and Fafnir snapped their heads forward, shoulders tight, bracing to smash through the whole onslaught, as that turtle's jaws belched acrid smoke again, and the cold metallic shine in its eyes promised the next wave of terror. Noah burst straight toward the giant shell, yelling to his comrades that he was counting on them. His confident voice was still wrapped in a thin, trembling edge of anxiety. He figured he could only flip the outcome by getting right up there, so he had to plant himself on the shell, even if it meant paying with his own life. Alexia cringed at his wild, desperate move and screamed that it was pure madness, but the moment she saw his iron resolve, she snapped that she was jumping in after him. A spark of pure determination flared in her eyes and she shot up after Noah, while Fafnir clocked it and realized the monster's attention was about to lock onto him instead. Even with danger screaming in his face, the dragon refused to back off. He clenched his teeth and seethed, knowing monsters had always been the easiest weapon villains ever used. With a sinister grin, Fafnir slammed into the turtle to throw it off, and while Noah dropped onto its shell, he felt the pulse of alien magic surging under his feet. Alexia hung back like an invisible lifeline, but when Noah insisted he had to do it alone, she shook her head hard. No way. He went still, shut his eyes, and focused hard, pulling in the energy all around him, while the brutal truth behind her father's death churned in her head. Alexia couldn't wrap her head around it. Noah really had murdered his own father, yet he kept flipping through the Book of Calm, hunting for a way to rewrite the rules of the fight. Noah clung to that book like it was destiny, refusing to look anywhere else, because he knew their victory hinged on it, and suddenly it felt like the whole world was charging up for one mission: to win. In the headquarters, Yun paced in panic, staring at the map as the officer snapped that their second line of defense was splitting, and the whole situation was already on the brink. Then suddenly, these ridiculously powerful adventurers showed up, and the turtles pushed ground to a halt, giving it the desperate breather it needed. Yun clocked that it was Noah's squad on the move, snapped her orders to the troops to back the adventurers right away, and sent the command down the line. She swept up every reserve with total confidence, snapped the S-ranks into the right spots, and ordered them to unleash magical weapons, because every single move she made could decide the fate of the capital. Meanwhile, Noah floated in that eerie emptiness and ripped through the pages, his fingertips brushing the ancient symbols as he started translating them, line by line. Page by page, fresh symbols surfaced. No manuscript on Earth had ever held a code like this before. He figured it out. This protection code was spotless, way more tangled than Sentinel V, but underneath, the whole idea stayed the same. Noah's gift for cracking codes kicked in, and almost on instinct he pulled the strings apart, grinning because the whole thing was way easier than he'd ever expected. In just a few seconds, the code caved in. Bam, the page flared to life and exposed the hidden truth about the armor's deadly weakness. After mastering every last secret about the turtle shell, he wasted no time. He passed it straight to Alexia and Fafnir so they could unleash a crushing, game-ending strike. Right after Noah finished the changes, he got zero reaction, because in his gut he already knew he'd messed up. Then the book snapped shut with a loud, shocking thud. In the sky, dozens of massive volumes erupted into existence, floating overhead with no shadows, swallowing the horizon whole. Noah realized he'd have to rewrite not just one tome but the entire library of knowledge, and still, fear never even showed up in his heart. He snatched the closest book and plunged right back into his work like he'd just slipped into those golden library days from childhood. Then he devoured ancient wisdom page by page, and now, right when everything got toughest, he read it all again, doubling his focus until it hurt. Then the next code cracked open, those runes just melted beneath his stare, and somehow Noah barely even noticed the time slipping or the exhaustion creeping in. Book after book spilled secrets, and somehow he didn't even clock how much energy he'd already burned. Deciphering had slipped into a mindless routine. With every page he flipped, he felt the finish line come closer. One key, one shot, and the monster's armor would finally crack. Meanwhile, Fafnir hovered in front of the shell, eyes locked on the turtle as it stretched out a paw, desperate to grab him. In the next heartbeat, the claw slammed down on the dragon, and no matter what he tried, he still got trapped in a brutal iron grip. The monster crushed the captive in its grip, and Fafnir, shocked by the raw power he was facing, refused to quit, still clawing and straining to break free. Suddenly, cannon blasts tore through the air from below, balls slammed straight into the turtle's shell, rattling the dragon's wings with a brutal shudder. The adventurers didn't waste a second. They slammed fresh rounds into the cannons, and the commander roared, "Hit the unarmored spot and pour every shot into one point." Fafnir couldn't even process it. Those same people he used to battle were now rushing to save his life, and their perfect coordination left him completely stunned. Magic surged inside the dragon's body as the earthlings channeled power straight into its horns, blasting its energy even higher. One of the witches blurted that she had no clue who this girl with horns even was, but she was throwing her final hope on her. Then her co-workers snapped up the channel of energy like they couldn't wait. Fafnir felt a power surge he'd never dared imagine. His old enemies turned into allies, driving their strength into one unstoppable defense. Feeling the support behind him, he dug deep, summoned every ounce of strength, and shot a bold, daring look. "Don't you dare underestimate me anymore." The dragon clocked the mistake. He delayed and doubted for way too long. During the seal he'd gone soft, but now that softness was ripped out of him. With wings stretched wide and fresh fury blazing, Fafnir braced to strike back at his wrongdoer. No mercy, no hesitation this time. Fafnir realized there was no time left to second-guess himself. Then, in the very next instant, his power detonated, swelling the turtle's fist from the inside as it cracked under the sheer overload. It looked like a miracle. Everyone stared at the dragon, eyes glued shut tight, totally unable to look away. With a heavy heart, Fafnir mumbled an apology to Noah, and instantly realized his power was the exact thing his friends needed right now. With a roar that tore open the sky, he ripped free from the monster's claws and slammed his fearsome dragon face back into place. Then the adventurers froze because right in front of them stood the legendary Fafnir. He yelled at the monster, daring it to keep going, because if it didn't back off, it would regret every second it kept existing. Right then, clawed paws dug into the shell, and a wave of unbearable flames crashed down on the giant body. The commander snapped his order to swarm the dragon, and the squad nodded and surged into action at once, raining fire on every weak spot they could find. Fafnir crushed the turtle and set it ablaze, and it screamed and thrashed, writhing in pure agony. Noah and Alexia hung above in silence, staring down at the brutal clash in their armor, feeling every single second slam down like a life-or-death verdict. In Noah's chest, a desperate prayer flickered. "Please, Fafnir, don't snap yet. Hold on until the reality rewrite is finished." Alexia could feel the raw mana surging through Noah. He wasn't just changing the world, he was rewriting the book of the world with his own hands. That manuscript, the people of Rune's greatest masterpiece, can rewrite the laws of reality itself. The girl nearly crumbled at the idea that this kind of power now belonged to someone beyond their bloodline, but her thoughts were ripped apart when a nightmare presence tore into the world. In the air, the silhouette of the darkness spirit snapped into existence, looming over everything like punishment you can't outrun. Locking eyes with Alexia, the spirit froze. He was 100% sure he'd wiped out every last one of the ruined people in the last war. The girl finally got it. This darkness was the hidden weight behind nearly every chain of tragedy that followed. As the shadow lunged closer, getting ready to strike, Alexia didn't even blink. The spirit screamed as it lunged for them, but she snapped her leg up and deflected that first hit without a second thought. A spark of rage flared in her eyes as she charged ahead, all momentum and fury, to shield Noah from the ancient evil. A sinister spirit surged back to life and snarled, "The book's powers won't be used, Noah dies right here." Then Alexia threw herself in front of him, unmoving, and faced the threat head-on. No retreat, Alexia planted herself like an unshakable wall, and the truth hit hard: this was the only way. She swore to herself she wouldn't let Noah die, never now and never ever again. The spirit of darkness clocked her unshakable resolve and sneered that the people of Rune never learn, then swore they'd doom themselves to destruction. He warned Alexia that it would be the end, no coming back, then charged straight at her, snapping out black tentacles that could rip space clean in two. After the hit landed, the girl snapped the dark impulse aside with brutal force, so hard the air itself rang from the shockwave. A fresh bundle of tentacles shot straight for Noah's face, and Alexia barreled in to grab them just a few centimeters away. The spirit sneered that mortals had no business touching his darkness, and the moment she did, it started burning her skin. Black tendrils coiled around his arms, slithering like living snakes, clawing to swallow every last spark of light. Praying for nothing but one thing, Noah finishing what he started, she clenched her teeth through the agony, refusing to let go of the tentacles. Meanwhile, even with fatigue gnawing at him, Fafnir huffed and blasted flames straight into the turtle's face, and the beast screamed in agony. On the battlefield, the warriors stared up in disbelief, seeing that legendary dragon battling right alongside them. And Noah stood amid the floating tomes, gripping a power that crackled in his hands, power that could remake the entire world. With every rewritten line, pure fire surged through his body, dragging him closer to that final, unbeatable victory. Around him, a whole galaxy of adventurers had already formed, each one carrying their own legend into the fray. Siegfried, the famed dragon slayer whose stare made even the toughest monsters shake, stood there in silence. Lawrence stood in command, an archmage whose name had become a legend across the magical world, the ultimate symbol of power and wisdom. Then another figure snapped Noah's focus: Nissa, the elf everyone calls Miss A, a proud, quiet tamer who radiated untouchable confidence. With a shrug in her voice, she said the capital's troubles meant nothing to her, yet the words felt way too loud beside Fenrir, the wolf she knew, who warned her not to speak them out loud. Nissa's an S-rank who clawed her way to the top all by herself, riding side by side with her beast companion, and everyone in the Aslidian Ark still talks about how feared and famous her guild of tamed beasts is. Serena, another Orangian adventurer, felt a fierce urge to prove herself, because in her head, Noah and the others were already clashing on the front lines, and she couldn't afford to look like she didn't belong. Serena's nerves sparked as she stared at the headquarters. Yun stood there like he owned the moment, barking orders with full focus, because the fate of the whole kingdom was hanging on this operation. Meanwhile, Yun spotted Princess Claudia and rushed straight to her, as if the weight of the whole world had just dropped onto his shoulders. Claudia thanked her for the brilliant command, but Yun quickly looked away, convinced she didn't deserve praise like that. The scared princess blurted it out. The sleepy turtle was seconds from the finish line, so Yun grabbed her and pushed for evacuation just in case the worst hit. Claudia refused to run. Warriors were battling for the kingdom, and she swore her place was right there among the people. Standing tall, she snapped that, as the king's representative, she'd never betray the army's fighting spirit. Yun's chest tightened and tears nearly spilled, but Claudia leaned in and promised, "We're winning, watch the turtle fall." One of the guards swore it: her heart won't shake, even when the dragon's roar tears the air, and he'll stay by the princess's side all the way to the bitter end. Claudia thanked her, but even as the words left her mouth, her eyes kept snapping back to Hildegand at the front, worry clinging to her like a vice. Meanwhile, the fight exploded in intensity. Thick smoke roared across the sky, swallowing the sun until it barely showed. Cannons roared nonstop, and each blast cracked through the air, leaving a devastating echo in its wake. Hildegand lay sprawled on the field, his clothes shredded and his entire body coated in grime and dust. Two guards burst into the scene, shouting that they'd finally tracked down the commander. The medic bent over him and shook him hard, trying to snap him back into his senses. He sized up the danger and fired off a messenger, ordering the winged dragon to race in fast and bring help. Suddenly, Gildigan let out a quiet groan, forced his eyes open, and blurted out, confused, where he'd ended up. The medic let out a shaky breath of relief, thanked fate, and wasted no time, rushing in to deliver the medication right away. He said that as the crew tried to pin down the turtle, the commander took a brutal hit, one that left him badly hurt. Hildegan nodded, replaying the fight in his head. Then the medic reassured him that the wound wasn't deadly and that he'd only blacked out for a brief moment. Hildegand finally rose and apologized for the mess, but the medic snapped back that it was nothing compared to the part he played in holding the defense together. Gildigand, still reeling from everything that just happened, had the sickening feeling he was about to forget something life or death important. Then the memory tore loose and vanished, and a cold knot of panic twisted itself in his gut. His fingers blindly clawed for the clover amulet, and those ancient runes on the metal burst to life, glowing red-hot. A brutal spike of pain slammed into his skull, like someone ripped open the seal on his memories, yet he had no time to piece any of it together. The pain was just barely survivable, but it wouldn't quit, like the world was hammering in an unfinished promise. He swore this talisman had been loved by someone close to him, but the name tied to it slipped away again and again until it vanished completely. He snapped back through clenched teeth to the doctor's question about how he felt. "My head is pounding." He wouldn't rest for a second. It was time to crash back into the fight, and even with the guards protesting, he grabbed the winged dragon and took off. Determination won't crack, straight ahead, no hesitation. Down below, the guards desperately wrestled to stop him, too late because the dragon had already swooped up and was hauling the commander toward that terrifying turtle. Hildegard's eyes locked onto the monster's grim shell as it roared upward with a tidal surge of colossal mana. Whirlwinds of magic blasted up from its surface, thundering so hard they looked like they could split the earth in two. Meanwhile, Alexia was crumbling at the edge of her limits, but she still refused to budge. She was fighting off the spirit of darkness with every last ounce of strength. Every new enemy she faced got stronger, and her shields kept getting shredded by the lightning clawing out of the darkness. With zero hesitation, she blocked one hit after another, daring every strike to break her, because she refused to go down. The reserves were vanishing fast. Noah's barrier started to shake, then it flickered and died away. At the very end, the final strike shattered their defense. The sphere split wide, and Alexia let out a blood-curdling scream. The hut's spirit grinned hard, roaring that it was finally time to wipe out the last remnants of the Rune people once and for all. Up in the sky, Hildegand caught it, and one blazing thought detonated inside him. He would tear apart the evil that was hunting the girl. Rage surged through him as he lifted the light of the seventh circle, then a bow of pure radiant energy snapped into existence in his hands, blazing like the first dawn. With raw power in its wake, the light arrow blasted through the turtle's shell in a searing flash, shattering its defense like an August spiderweb snapping under strain. At that moment, the spirit of darkness unraveled like smoke after a brutal storm, disappearing without a single trace. Hildegand shot up to the drained Alexia and blurted out, panicked, "Are you okay?" And when she stared at him in shock, she suddenly realized he was Noah's father. When Gildigand remembered it in the palace, the look in her eyes snapped into place. She'd realized Noah hadn't killed his father like they'd met there before. He snapped at her for taking the risk, swearing he'd end the fight alone, but Alexia's eyes narrowed, because the guy standing in front of her felt nothing like that cruel mage from the past. He used to be carved out of pure cruelty, but now softness crept in, doubts swarming his mind and turmoil tearing at his insides. These twists pushed her to a chilling conclusion. Hildegand's attitude toward Noah had changed for good, no matter what. So she urged them to team up and guard Noah, because only side by side could they punch through the darkness. The moment the magician heard her say his son, his eyes snapped wide like he'd just been told for the first time, and that shock scared Alexia stiff. He jabbed a finger at Noah's silhouette lurking behind the girl and demanded, "Is that the one you mean?" Stunned, she blurted out whether it was true. Hildegard couldn't even remember her own son. Then the reply, "It's impossible," hit like a sudden, searing stab of pain. Alexia replayed Noah's confession, "I don't have a father anymore," and it hit her. He'd used magic to wipe every trace of his father, remembering who Noah even was. Right then, the spirit of darkness surged back in front of them, sneering at their pathetic attempt at resistance. Gildigand went pale when he realized the seventh circle of light still couldn't wipe the enemy out. What kind of monster survives that? Alexia told Noah that this spirit summoned the sleeping turtle and masterminded every tragedy, her voice shaking with raw pity for him. She cast the mage a pleading look and begged for help, because only if they team up will they stand a chance. Hildegand had no idea what was going on, but he felt the girl's grit, so he nodded and promised, "Tell me what you want, I'll back you up." Alexia gave a shaky thanks, but her heart screamed, those erased memories can never come back, yet she still had to fight no matter what it cost. The spirit of darkness, towering and terrifying, hissed, "Numbers don't matter, no matter how much power you've got, I'll swallow it all." Hildegand lit his palms with a raging flame and faced Noah, and suddenly his father's courage came roaring back from the dark. While the battlefield burned and magic spun into a violent storm, one name kept roaring in the heart of Gildigand, Noah, like he was an old friend coming back to save the day. He tried, almost desperately, to place that name, because that young face stirred a weird, ancient familiarity in him, like a buried memory he couldn't quite reach through thick fog. In the pitch-black void of oblivion, every thought tore at the next, but one familiar feeling wouldn't let go, like a buried scar of memory hiding under an enchantment's veil. Alexia's scream, "Protect Noah!" yanked the mage back to reality, and he clenched his resolve, bracing for the showdown that would decide everything. He slammed up a blazing wall with sword and shield, snatched the black spirit arrows out of the air, and blew their fire into a roaring storm of deadly sparks. She clutched the defense and felt Noah's mana surge like a raging river, pouring straight into the turtle's shell, only to crash against invisible barriers. Hildegand realized that without protective seals, too much power could snap a young man in half faster than any enemy weapon ever could. From the shadows behind him, darkness surged forward. Noah was met by the spirit's lunge, and a black blade flashed through the air. The blade stabbed straight through the fiery phantom. It screamed with light, then vanished in smoke, because the mage had conjured that third circle illusion just to buy time. That bewildered spirit couldn't see the scam, and Hildegand smirked, calling him a gullible fool for falling for a kid's trick. The disturbed darkness surged back for another strike, but all it caught was a mirage, because the real warriors had already slipped to a new position. The wizard burst into loud laughter, taunting, "How many more strikes until the void breaks?" And you could feel it minute by minute. His advantage kept snowballing. Rage surged as the spirit slammed through the burning barrier, smashing the fake shadows to bits, while the real trio scrambled back again, stealing precious minutes to breathe. Gildigand murmured, pleased the trap had done its job, but the moment he turned to Noah, exhaustion hit him sharp and dangerous, like a crack spreading through an ice dam. Alexia tried to share her mana, but the mage snapped her away fast. She was barely standing on her own power, one bad breath away from going out like a candle in the wind. The choice hit him like lightning. He'd hand his own power to his son, no matter what it cost, and every doubt burned away the second his determination flared. With his palm pressed to Noah's chest, Hildegand tore open a surge of energy, shocked to find the kid's belief in the impossible was rock solid. The wizard ordered Alexia to guard the spirit of darkness until they smashed both the turtle and the vile evil haunting the kingdom. Alexia nodded, white-knuckling the rune-etched sword of light, and even with wounds biting into her, a fierce need to protect the ones she loved burned like fire in her eyes. Light, flame, and faith fused together right before the decisive strike. All three stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to charge into the darkness with zero fear. Hildegand stared at Noah, and a jolt of shock flared in his eyes because the kid's moves and mana somehow felt eerily familiar. Right as the magic started to flow, he suddenly caught Riene's notes, his wife's voice in the air, and it hit him way too hard to be a coincidence. A brutal spike of pain detonated inside my skull, and for one terrifying second the world dropped away into dead silence and darkness. He spun away, terrified his feelings would wreck his focus the instant everything mattered most. Riene's memories slammed back like a wave. He yanked out the photo medallion, and there was her smiling face, staring back like she was alive. Right in front of her, the day finally arrived, when she woke him up at the writing desk where he'd face-planted into sleep while reading a treatise on magic. She teased him, snapping that he always buries his health in the grimoires like it doesn't even matter. She warned him, "Someday our child will copy your habit of crashing under these parchments, so learn to rest right beside me while you still can." He was laughing up a storm, swearing he'd be way more careful. Then they met at the Royal Academy of Magic. Riene, just a regular girl, bulldozed past the aristocrat Gildigand with pure grit and refused to quit determination, and she was the first one to dive into the stream. At first, it was a non-stop showdown, aristocratic pride clashing head-on with raw independence and strength of character. Every fight only welded them closer, turning their bickering into an unusual kind of respect. Eventually, the fighting melted into feelings they couldn't shove aside anymore. Even with families closing ranks and society judging them, the young lovers fought back for their own future and sealed it with an engagement. Their marriage didn't come easy, old differences kept tripping them up, but they refused to back down and showed with every hard day that their love was the real deal. One day, Riene clutched a stack of books and demanded to know what they were. He answered, grimoires from the School of Fire and Ice. The Aldegime heirs must master the basic elements, but that alone won't cut it if they want the title of a true master. She flashed a smile and asked him straight up if he'd started thinking of a name for their child. The usually stone-faced Hildegand snapped, admitted he hadn't picked a seat yet, and said he'd sit down soon to start searching. He set out to find options for a boy and a girl, then he was headed toward Riene, completely blind to how fast the world was about to flip upside down. As Hildegand stepped into the room, he froze solid. Riene lay crumpled on the floor and you could see her strength draining out of her. He crumpled nearby and the doctor checking the mother snapped the truth into the room. This was critical, and without instant help there was basically no chance left. The mage's face went bone white. He knew his wife was fragile, but he never dreamed she'd be this completely defenseless. The thought that every precious moment could vanish in an instant stabbed straight through his heart, but he refused to let panic steal the wheel. With tears burning in her eyes, Hildegand leaned close to Riene and begged her to hold on to her strength, murmuring that everything would be okay because the doctors would pull off the impossible. Remembering why he'd come, he cranked out a shaky grin and told them the chosen name for the baby, Noah. Riene greeted him with a gentle, tired smile and said, "What a beautiful name," and right then a spark of hope lit up his heart. Then she leaned in and whispered, barely louder than air, that she feared she'd never see her son's eyes again. And those words struck the mage's soul like a blade of ice. He screamed her name, agony ripping through his chest, while Riene softly apologized for every bit of trouble she'd put her beloved through. Hildegand crushed her hand, swearing he loved her more than anything, but as death closed in, those vows felt utterly useless. In Rainie's tired eyes, a soft light still burned. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she breathed out her answer full of love. The magician pressed her hand to his chest, desperate to hold onto even a single crumb of her warmth. Pretty soon just that baby was left in the room, bawling at the top of his lungs. Hildegand's whole world had fallen apart. Riene's dream of a shared future with him shattered into dust, but she still left him the one treasure that mattered most, their son. Noah couldn't hold it. His quiet sobs shook him, while his father bent over his wife's body, tears falling onto her peaceful face. The sting of losing her wrecked him from the inside out. He swore he'd be a better father than he ever was a husband, all for Riene's memory. Staring at the baby, Hildegand froze, because an unheard-of magical power erupted from the tiny thing in front of him. Pure mana streamed through the air so intensely it felt almost touchable, and the mage held his breath, stunned by what he was feeling. Not a single wizard he'd met had meridians that lined up so perfectly. Nature had basically forged a real-life miracle. But right as the joy hit its peak, something crushing followed. Riene paid the ultimate price, giving her life for the birth of this incredible boy. Noah stared back and Hildegand shuddered because the truth hit him hard. He'd never been the father his son needed, and he'd cruelly pinned Riene's death on the very child who didn't deserve it. 5 years flew by, and when they finally crossed paths again, young Noah was already showing off abilities so wild they literally stole your breath. Hildegand felt a fresh agony rip through him the moment he heard his son could decode ancient texts, reviving a dream he thought was dead long ago. He poured his own mana into Noah, and the instant he did, the boy's power surged so hard it felt like he was swallowing celestial fire. In a storm of flame and magic, every day from the mage's past lit up in his mind, right alongside the sins he'd been desperately trying to bury. He replayed the moment he shoved Noah aside, slammed himself into that mountain, and finally understood it. Every drop of pain he handed his son came roaring back at him. Racked with remorse, he sank down beside Noah, finally realizing he'd never become the man and the father he was meant to be. With tears streaking past the stern mask, he choked out his confession between sobs. He'd personally wrecked his son's future, and there was no coming back, no forgiveness, not even for himself. The humiliation he threw at that boy came back like shattered glass, every single frame sliced harder than a blade. No time left for atonement. Up in the sky, the spirit of darkness bellowed, declaring it had uncovered their fragile truth. Alexia bolted in to stop them, but her strength was nearly gone. She snapped at Gildiganda to get Noah out, even as doubt flickered across his eyes. He asked what would happen to her, but the girl snapped, "Save your son, don't look back." Her voice rang like steel. Snatching Noah, the mage bolted away as the spirit cackled that the rune's fate had been sealed ages ago. Alexia unfurled runes of blinding light, slammed into the darkness in her way, and carved out just enough time for her friends to escape. She screamed that she'd never quit, even if the road dove straight into the abyss. Then she became the first to hurl herself into the fight, slicing through the darkness with every last ounce of strength. Hildegand hauled Noah in his arms, and guilt and determination slammed into his chest until it felt like his heart would burst. He was going to save his son, no matter what it cost. Behind her, the punches roared like thunder, enough to shatter Alexia and everything the runes ever built, yet her body blazed with stubborn, unbreakable courage. The girl shot upward, slammed her hand into that black blade, and drove the darkness back, like the final wall standing between evil and hope. The spirit choked on the thought of total annihilation, but Alexia shot back. "No matter how our people fall, even the ashes will flare with resistance." Way up ahead, Hildegand whipped his gaze back. There, in the barrier's eerie glow, Alexia's silhouette stood rock steady. With Noah clutched tight in his arms, he swore he'd never betray his family again. Hildegand skidded to a stop, realizing he'd been running while Alexia was slugging it out alone. Shame burned in his throat. He dragged Noah to safety, dropped down beside him, and stared in disbelief. How in the world did everything crash this far into the abyss? Despair slammed down like a weight on my chest. My life shattered, and the scariest thing was staring into my son's eyes while every painful memory flared up and burned. He replayed every time he crushed the boy's will, convinced that control was love, then realized apologies didn't cut it anymore. A cowardly thought snapped through his head: maybe he could vanish forever and stop hurting Noah. That self-condemnation got cut off as wild laughter exploded. Darkness spirit surged in, lifting Alexia off her feet and yanking her hand like a puppet. He dangled a pardon if the girl would turn on Noah, but the answer burned back like fire: never. The gloom smirked, sure the runt couldn't change the turtle's fate, and yanked a black trail straight toward Alexia's throat. Suddenly, that familiar voice cut through the chaos: "Let her go," and Hildegand snapped around, scorched to the bone but refusing to break. The girl shuddered because the mage was hanging by a thread, yet in his eyes there was pure fire, like he'd fought his way back after all. The spirit let out a sharp laugh, screaming that he was a madman, while Hildegand insisted, right to his face, that he was forging a protective barrier for Noah. Alexia couldn't buy a word of it, because here, every single second could rip someone's life right out of their hands. Gloom slammed into the mage's eyes, dripping pure contempt, and hissed that he was worth absolutely nothing. Guilt gnawed at Hildegand's heart over Riene's death and the cold hatred he once carried for his own son, but he couldn't keep hiding anymore. With a heavy breath, he whispered, "Enough, now it's my duty to love Noah and shield him from harm." The spirit exploded into a scream, yet the mage shot back up as flames whirled around him, yelling, "I'm still the strongest fire mage." The words hit like a thunderclap, like the darkness itself froze, sensing the wind shift in an instant. Hildegand planted himself between Alexia and Morocco, his chest blazing with remorse and relentless determination. He threw down the challenge: "Go ahead, push through me, this time I'm not backing off." Sparks burst into the night as the old sinner didn't battle the enemy, he clawed his way toward redemption, fighting for the heart he wanted to save. Hildegard's eyes blazed with pure determination as he spoke a spell that could scorch the very soul of darkness. The spirit of darkness boomed with laughter, sneering that it was a pathetic joke, but the mage ignored every taunt and instead bowed to Noah and Riene, lifting a hand packed with burning mana. He threw away his titles and glory, then yanked the fiery spirits sleeping in his blood for centuries into the open, unleashing them into the universe's darkest corners. The spirit buckled under the heat and ripped Alexia free. She crashed to the ground while the enemy sneered, asking if that mage really thought he'd be allowed to finish his spell. The black blade screamed through the air, and with that same illusion, Gildigan slipped out of the attack, forcing the darkness to lunge again, straight into the empty void. Seeing the enemy tumble into the trap for the second time, the mage's heart swelled with confidence. Turns out the darkness's arrogance left it wide open. With a blistering flash, he disappeared and reappeared right behind the spirit, roaring as he summoned the primordial fire forged since the world was born. A massive sphere of energy detonated in his hands, unleashing the raw power of destructive flame. In their pupils, a stone-hard will burned bright, and those clenched hands clutched the core like it was the light that would end the world. That was *** meteoric Kara ***, the 10th ultimate level of fire magic. The wizard just knew this blast would smash straight past the turtle's magic, and it wouldn't just hit, it would only awaken the preferences of darkness. The sphere ripped through space like it was paper, smashing into the spirit and wiping out its very essence, along with everything in its path. Gildigan got swallowed by his own raging flames, and his strength drained away like melting wax under the scorching sun. All that was left was one desperate wish, to beg Noah for forgiveness for every sin from the past. The steps dragged to a halt, the mage wobbled like he'd been cut loose from the world, and Alexia shot in, planting her back to keep him from crashing down. Wiped out, he shut his eyes as the girl praised his magic as magnificent. Then, for the first time, he heard it that way, "Father," and the next second he crumpled to the ground, utterly drained. From the clubs of smoke, a sinister rasping crawled out, proof the spirit of darkness had survived, roaring with pure rage and ruthless contempt. He burst into an even darker form and then, finally, admitted it. For the very first time in 100 years, he had to bear his true face. A savage, crushing aura slammed down under Alexia's feet, shaking the very ground like reality couldn't handle his power. He solemnly swore that for 100 years nobody had ever dragged him this far, yet now every last soul would have to face his bottomless darkness. With pure confidence in its own invincibility, the spirit of darkness hurled itself at Alexia, gaping with a gigantic maw and vowing that it would end all their suffering in an instant. Her eyes went wide with pure terror, like the final moment was only one heartbeat away. Out of the darkness, a silhouette burst into view, and when he lifted a hand like he was begging forgiveness, he whispered, "I'm late." Just as the spirit loomed over Gildigan and Alexia, a lightning-bright ray tore through the air and slammed into his chest. Light tore into the darkness, blasting through the black essence with insane speed and surgical precision. The beam blasted Noah free, then as the light vanished, he stepped forward and stared at his battered friends, eyes full of determination. With wide-eyed disbelief, the boy blurted out, "Wait, is that really the same great spirit of darkness?" Alexia finally understood. Noah tore apart the turtle's perfect defense, and that opening let the enemy get blasted by magic attacks. Relief hit the girl like a wave, but Noah was already turning his eyes back to his father. He clocked the exhausted Hildegard but swallowed his questions, because every second mattered right then, and just as he did, a crack split across the turtle's shell. Noah felt sure it was his father's magic at work and urged everyone to back away to a safer distance. Determination burned in him as he hauled Gildigan onto his shoulders, sprang out of the battle's epicenter and vanished, ready to strike back. The turtle caught a gut-punching roar, and its shell split open in a spiderweb of cracks, collapsing as magic pressure crushed it. Yun stared in shock as the ancient beast finally began to crumble, and the warrior beside her said their efforts were working. Though it was only partial, it was still progress. The commander finally clocked it. Only Noah could pull off the impossible, and right then Princess Claudia came walking up. Claudia locked eyes with steel in hers. "We win right now, no excuses." Yun nodded fast and her heart hammered like a war drum. Up in the sky, Lawrence, the court archmage himself, soared onto a broom, standing perfectly balanced. Fueled by pure inspiration, he poured every last drop of mana into a single strike and blasted a third-circle lightning bolt straight into the shell's center. The electric blade carved straight through the turtle's body, and Lawrence froze, because the magic didn't act the way it was supposed to. Incredible, this turtle didn't just tank the hits, it slammed them back with twice the force, wrecking itself even worse than before. This moment went down in history. Lawrence, the seasoned mage, finally admitted he'd almost never seen anything like it, and all his own work was still dwarfed by what Noah pulled off when he tamed that massive element. Noah stood beside Alexia with unconscious Hildegand crumpled at his side, and then, right over the chaos of the battlefield, an SOS signal started flashing. The young man flashed a confident grin and shouted, "Don't panic, reinforcements are already charging in, hold on a little longer." Even while the battlefield raged, he knew one thing for sure. He had to cut the bond with his father once and for all, because that protective memory erasure didn't work anymore, and it was finally time to set everything right. Even in the middle of the chaos and bloodshed, Noah couldn't drown Hildegard's painful memories out of his heart. Alexia spoke softly, and in every word you could hear it. Her father truly regretted what he did, begged for forgiveness, and finally admitted the damage he caused to his son. These words hit Noah like a punch to the gut. Today he couldn't forgive right away, so he opened up about what he glimpsed during the erasure, strange fragments of the past flickering in his mind. Then the truth hit like a punch. His father didn't just care for his mother, he loved her for real, and that shattered everything the boy had believed before. Noah finally understood he'd been misreading everything, so the bitterness drained away and all that was left was a clean, crushing sadness. Noah still remembered that make-or-break moment when Hildegand shoved his own mana into him, because without it the kid would have died for sure, and then he realized, after the dust settled, he had to confront his father and get back what was taken. Seeing Alexia's wounds, he demanded she take a break. She pushed back, but after a long sigh she finally gave in because yeah, it honestly made sense. Meanwhile, the fight against the sleeping turtle roared into its final, explosive climax. Fafnir didn't let up, he blasted the monster with non-stop scorching volleys of fire. The dragon stared in shock as Noah and his friends cracked through that impenetrable shell like it was nothing. Suddenly, the turtle clocked the opening in his enemy's armor, slammed in with a brutal strike and sent Fafnir crashing to the ground. Terrified cries echoed far below. The commander sprinted for help, but the soldier yanked him back and warned that a pointless attack would only make the damage explode even more. Fafnir snapped awake from the dust, bared his teeth, shrugged off the pain, and blasted back into the sky. Burning through his exhaustion, he slammed through the air and buried himself into the enemy's armor, flames roaring on impact. Each crushing hit cracked the shell open, iron skin or not. The turtle started to slump, and the adventurers below stared up with their mouths hanging wide. Meanwhile, Nissa, the elf everyone calls Miss A, vaulted onto her majestic familiar, ready to charge straight into the decisive assault. Nissa rode Fenrir's back, eyes locked on that colossal beast. Then the moment she took it in, she leaned down hard toward the wolf to get a perfect view of the battlefield. Her eyes snapped to Fafnir's collar, and the elf's jaw dropped in shock because this wild, terrifying dragon was apparently someone's pet. She studied the collar and leaned in, asking Fenrir if they'd ever met, and the wolf's eyes lit up as he admitted he'd fought side by side with the dragon. Fenrir closed in, and when their eyes locked, a raging blaze erupted in his gaze. Fafnir snapped his wings wide, barked out a crude joke, and teased Fenrir like, "Nice puppy." The wolf shot back, calling him a toasted lizard and promising to freeze him solid. Then Nissa burst in, cutting the fight short and reminding them the battle was still waiting. The cannons kept screaming, but one adventurer snapped his eyes to it. Turtle's barrier was thinning fast, and it was time to put that monster down for good. At the signal, the mages snapped into action, forging a chain seal from blazing light and rune script. Shining chains, sharp as iron snakes, snapped onto the monster's limbs and locked them tight, cutting off its every move. The turtle froze for a split second, then the chains groaned seductively under that massive, earth-shaking power. Seconds dragged like forever, crack, then another crack across the rings, and even that scorching magic couldn't stop the beast. Nissa slammed straight into the fight. She landed strike after strike, but no matter how hard she hit, the armor stayed unshakable. Her fierce determination tore the monster's hide, but it still couldn't stop it for good. More adventurers rushed in with the elf stacking reinforcements and driving the assault harder. They battered the turtle like water gnaws at stone, step by step, crushing its defenses until they finally cracked. Each fresh strike slammed into the ground, the beast's roar tore through the air, then the cracks started spreading wider and wider. Fafnir and Fenrir, wiped out but never backing down, scorched and froze their armor to keep the opponent from closing in. The wailing screamed harder and harder, and before anyone could blink, raw flesh was already showing through the cracks. Yun and Claudia watched from far off, and it felt like history was kicking down the door. Everything was changing right in front of their eyes. Yun couldn't help it. Long before Rastya, this very place was once a thriving city-state, and sure, all that was left was a ghost of the past, until today, its land started forging a brand new legend. Perkisha used to be the blazing heart of power and culture, the magnificent stronghold the Run tribe built, ruling these lands like kings. All that's left of the city are ruins, just a haunting imprint of what once stood there, because time and violent storms have nearly scrubbed them clean. Yun, barely holding her voice together, told Claudia that back when everything was at its peak, Kirkshisha's heart was crowned by the heavenly tower, standing so tall it pierced the very sky. At the same time, Yun clutched a launch mechanism, his fingers drifting over the button like they had a mind of their own, while the commanders nearby barked orders to scramble and retreat. The sleepy turtle bulldozed straight through the final line of defense, kicking the whole operation into its last, unstoppable phase. On the other side, Alexia kept her eyes locked on everything, and Yun felt pure gratitude, like she'd truly trusted him and pulled him fully into the plan. Yun felt reality lurch with every heartbeat, then he slammed the button, accepting the doom that was coming. She snapped her gaze to Claudia and declared it was time to pull back, and the princess nodded just as hard as if neither of them would ever blink. Yun couldn't shake the thought, if they hadn't rushed to those ruins with Noah back then, if they hadn't crossed paths with Alexia, everything would have shattered into a totally different future. She finally got it. Everything they'd done before was stitched into today, and without those choices the kingdom would have collapsed. Suddenly, an explosion roared beneath the tower, everything shook, the ground and the air trembling like the world's own foundation had split wide open. The very next second, the massive structure crumbled down and barreled straight toward the sleeping turtle. The tower crumbled in unstoppable slow motion, and it felt like fate had finally run out of excuses. Stone blocks and steel slammed onto the massive body, and the fortress rattled hard under the shockwave. Yun's heart hammered as she and Claudia stared on. Would this finally be the move that shuts down the fight? The turtle, huddled under the rubble, suddenly screamed with a roar so loud it shook the air. Then it stretched out its limbs and flung the debris aside like it was nothing but brittle splinters. The ground buckled under Yun's feet, and right then Fafnir burst into view nearby. Without a second thought, he declared he'd handle it, then blasted into the sky on those massive wings, carving the air in one roaring streak. As it drew near, the dragon ripped open the air and blasted a brutal column of flame that tore straight through the sky. A fiery beam slammed straight into the turtle's mouth, detonating a blinding surge of light that flooded everything around it, like the world itself had caught fire from the heat. A brutal blast of heat roared from the turtle's mouth, and it slammed everyone nearby clean off their feet. The flames dwindled to nothing, and Fafnir yanked in a shaky breath as he shrank fast. His body was done for. He murmured that he'd hit his limit, then started to drop. Yun didn't even blink. She charged straight in and snatched the dragon out of the sky mid-flight. Right then, the adventurer up on the tower peered through the telescope and blurted, stunned, "The sleeping turtle isn't moving anymore." The moment that victory hit the news, it tore through everyone's world, and pure joy erupted in every single heart. The warriors clashed fists and nodded to each other, like they'd just survived the worst of the storm and the battle was finally done. But the spirit of darkness refuses to lose. It boils with rage at the idea that humans have won, and even after the turtle is revived by its power, it still gets knocked down. Rage surged through him. He had to seize control at any cost and strike back for every wound Noah left behind. A spirit ripped control from the turtle's body, took over completely, and started living inside it. Noah, Alexia, Yun, Claudia, and the others stared in stunned silence as the beast clawed itself back up and tore straight toward the capital. The new spectacle was downright terrifying. This turtle rampaged harder than ever, roaring through the world with brutal strength and smashing everything in sight. It felt like the world had run out of obstacles. Yun just couldn't wrap her mind around what she was seeing. Panic exploded across the adventurers, people shoved through the chaos, scrambling to safety and saving their own lives. Claudia barked an order the moment it hit. Every troop had to fall back, because fighting on would just stack the wreckage higher. She demanded the capital be evacuated, because the fallout ahead could turn utterly catastrophic. Nissa clutched the reins atop Fenrir, her nerves screaming as the chaos spiraled. One more step from that monster and the elven village would be doomed. Fenrir demanded they would defend their home, and the elf went paperwhite, hissing that against something like that, almost a deity in power, their odds were basically zero. In the choking dark, the turtle cracked its mouth open, then beams of solid darkness blasted the ground, shredding everything they touched. The beast's dark spirit gleefully feasted on the fear and despair of the people, feeding it even more. His dream of swallowing the whole world in shadow until the very last light dies now felt dangerously close. Fear surged, but Noah and Alexia didn't slow down. They tore through the forest as the turtle pounded the earth and shook the ground with every brutal strike. Between breaths, Noah demanded whether the spirit of darkness had fused with the monster. Alexia answered through pain that it had. Realization slammed him. He should have struck sooner when the beast was still weak, but the moment was gone and now it was too late. Noah froze, wrestling fear in his chest, and swore to himself, this isn't the end. He remembered the book of the world, how it could expose an enemy's weakness, and when he shut his eyes and poured every ounce of magic into it, he opened them to find the book had vanished. My heart clenched with pure dread, like something crucial was slipping away from my memory and vanishing into the dark. Alexia softly called out to him, clocking the confusion on his face, and even though she didn't understand everything yet, she could feel it. Noah wasn't meant to hold the power he was trying to claim. Her voice shook as she told me the truth. Noah might be tied to the book, but he isn't a real full member of the tribe, so his power has hard limits. In despair, he demanded, is there any way to boost my powers? And Alexia just shook her head. She didn't have an answer either. Still, the fact that Noah had somehow unlocked the book's power at all felt like a miracle. Thoughts sprinted through his head, but instinct shouted one thing: the exit was right there, close enough to touch, so he quietly pivoted and walked away. He ordered Alexia to stay put and stop chasing danger because he had to face the enemy without the book's help, alone. Alexia shot back, confused and shaken because she couldn't believe he'd pull it off by himself. Noah didn't waver for a second. He swore he'd come back alive and begged her to never let that promise fade. Alexia felt her entire world flip upside down, tears burning in her eyes as her father's face, the man who vanished once and never came back, crashed into her memory. She refused to watch anyone slip away again. She couldn't just let Noah go. Right then he unleashed his skill, and the sword ripped upward into the sky. Alexia didn't hesitate for a second. She unleashed her power, rocketed into the air and popped up right beside her. Magic surged through her body, and Noah snapped his gaze back to meet hers. With pure determination blazing in her voice, she swore she knew exactly how to supercharge his magic. When her father died, the throne of Kirkshisha sat empty and cold, so the princess of the Rune tribe had one shot. She could pass it to Noah. She slid her hand onto his chest and made up her mind, this had to be done. They have to get married. Then Noah steps into the throne, and with it comes full access to the book of the world. Alexia didn't even pause for a heartbeat. She shot off at once. A kiss landed, then bam, her childhood memories came rushing back, swamping her heart with everything she'd buried. Alexia couldn't forget her father's words. In Rune, this isn't just an act, it's the most precious, deeply personal gift reserved only for people who are truly worth it. In a trembling whisper, she vowed, from this moment on, I'm begging the tribe for eternal protection of Noah Aldejaim. With a grin, Alexia took a step back, and Noah, frozen with shock and burning embarrassment, could only stare at her in silence. She blurted out an apology for how fast it all happened, then said, this marriage was our mutual choice. Noah shot to his feet, still stunned, like his mind couldn't catch up with what was happening. Suddenly, a magical aura detonated around him, and his body surged with a power he'd never felt before. Alexia couldn't hide the shock. Noah is now the king of the Rune tribe, and with that crown came unlimited access to the Book of Peace's power. Caught in the whirlwind's very eye, Noah felt his thoughts, his emotions, and even his soul get swept into the ancient tide of power. Right then, the Book of Peace materialized in front of them, and Alexia grinned like, that's it, we're winning for sure. Noah stared at the manuscript like he already knew the world was about to change. Meanwhile, that sinister turtle prowled through the capital like a cursed nightmare, tearing everything apart. Darkness itself stared down with icy eyes, soaking up the townspeople's terror as they scrambled to get ready for what they all knew was coming for them. In the very next second, he detonated a fresh wave of icy darkness, devouring everything in its path. Up on one of the towers, Noah opened the Book of Peace, slid his fingers across the pages like they were alive, and started rewriting reality one line at a time. It was like the world itself obeyed him. When the monster's maw exploded with darkness, it suddenly snapped course and veered aside. The adventurers stared in disbelief as that black, lethal stream, deadly just moments ago, snapped, thinned, and vanished while it slid past the streets. Noah didn't hesitate, he slammed out a mass healing spell and the warriors felt their wounds knit shut while their strength came roaring back. Then he slammed spatial transfer into motion, blasting everyone into a safe sector just beyond the blast zone. Still twisted by the darkness, the turtle glared at the tower with pure contempt. Noah was the only thing standing between her and it. In that electrifying moment, they both knew it. This final duel was locked in, and the fate of the capital hung on the king's grip on the Book of Peace. From the turtle's depths, the spirit of darkness hissed that he never thought the runes would summon the Book of Peace's power again, said it was already enough to wipe out Noah, and then the full strength would be his. Noah snapped that today he'd crush the darkness and its evil games for good, and the spirit just grinned wider like, "Go on, try." Noah didn't hesitate, he yanked the blazing light blade out and drove it straight for the heart of the darkness. With one single strike, he didn't stop, he ripped open the Book of Peace and rewrote the lines, and suddenly the swords of light exploded into countless blades. A storm of radiant blades, like a whole starry army, crashed down on the dark entity. The spirit erupted into mocking laughter, sneering that the attack was nothing but a kid's game, and that it couldn't survive real darkness. He unleashed magic and swatted the radiant barrage aside. Those glowing blades shattered into sparks that fizzled out without landing a single hit. Down below, adventurers and sorcerers stared in awe and dread. Every time the blades flashed, Noah looked like a miracle brought to life, and Yun squinted through the light and finally recognized who it was. Those rays flared out of nowhere, and just like that, Noah's nose started bleeding. Mana was draining fast, and his body was losing strength by the second. The spirit of darkness cackled and ranted that without enough power, the Book of Peace was nothing but a worthless trinket. But Noah didn't throw in the towel. He realized rewriting reality takes colossal, gut-crushing energy. Staring at the page, he traced his name, yanked the lines into a new order, and poured out his own magic, smashing the rules and bending what possible even means. At that exact moment, power surged through him, soaring to heights he couldn't even picture. His aura blazed with power like nothing else. Those old restrictions shattered, and pure energy poured through him without limit. The spirit of darkness watched in silence as Noah's controlled turtle lost its dark power, and Yun realized the boy had fully taken over. Noah lunged into the attack like lightning, and the spirit froze, dumbfounded, demanding to know who he'd become. Then the young man didn't hesitate, he ordered surrender without conditions because with the Book of Peace, darkness had nowhere left to hide. The spirit smirked like it already owned the moment, then taunted Noah. Was he really sure he'd win? Noah only shrugged, ready to face whatever fate threw at him. Rage-goated, darkness erupted in rolling waves of black, snapping back to the time it already murdered the king of the runes, because it also had the book in its grip. Black clouds churned over the capital, swallowing the sky whole, because the decisive battle for light was about to ignite. The clouds slammed over the city and the book's pages started going black, sucking up light like night swallowing day. Noah snapped his eyes to the manuscript in sheer panic, and his chest tightened. Did that light really disappear for good with nothing left behind? The spirit of darkness smirked and said it had spun its own doom right into the world's core. Now the Book of Peace is off-limits to Noah. The black veil kept crawling over the capital, swallowing street after street until nothing was left untouched. With a violent shove, the spirit yeeted Noah across the tower. He slammed into it, and the stones erupted into a clattering storm. But the gloom didn't fade, it surged back in, ready to smash down with another attack. Roaming the streets, he screamed that everyone would die, swallowed by a crushing dark. The adventurers huddled up for the end, but Noah, despite the brutal hit, snapped back to his feet. His strength was draining fast, and the book was still just out of reach. He stared again at her pages, scorched black with fury. At first glance, they looked lifeless, but then something snapped the young man's attention, forcing him to stare closer. And it hit him, this solid surface wasn't solid at all, it was crawling with tiny microsymbols. Noah stared at those tiny, mind-bending patterns like nothing he'd ever seen before. Yet if they really are symbols, he knew he could crack the code. Back in those lonely training days, he looked back and realized every single minute had counted. That rare gift of decoding ancient texts was built for this exact moment. Meanwhile, the spirit of darkness, absolutely certain it would win, sneered that the whole world was already his. Suddenly he realized the darkness was ripping open, and bright rays of light punched through. Up on that tower lit by pure determination, Noah stood tall, because his magic wouldn't let darkness win. He screamed at the enemy that slammed the turtle shell's absolute defense right against the darkness itself. He leaned in and swore the world's fabric was stitched from symbols and the book of the world could rewrite anything at all. Then the adventurers stared down below, stunned, not daring to believe what they were seeing. The spirit of darkness couldn't wrap its mind around how Noah pulled it off, so he shot back the truth. The turtle shell drinks in magic without wrecking it, and now that same power is working for the light. The turtle's shell drank in the gloom night after night, soaking up the darkness's power until its very aura felt overflowing. Its surface slowly ignited, caught the darkness it had just swallowed, and then erupted with a blazing inner glow. Noah grinned when he saw it. This armor didn't just swallow the darkness, it knew exactly how to twist the energy it stole and slam it right back into the enemy. Just as he was about to finish, the shell detonated, blasting a ferocious stream of mana straight into the very core of the darkness. Noah barked, "You picked the wrong fighter," and then snapped, "If you hadn't, the whole world would have been crushed under your rule long ago." The spirit of darkness howled in agony, its shell was splitting apart, and even its mighty essence couldn't take the impact. Doubt ignited in his eyes. Could anyone really do something that cruel? He stayed still, but everything around him shifted like the world refused to stay the same. People grew stronger by the day because their power wasn't just magic, it was the hard-earned knowledge and battle-tested experience they passed down for generations. Right then, the Book of Peace in Noah's hands thudded and vanished. Its mission was done. Noah held his breath and silently thanked the artifact. Knowing the timing was perfect, the king launched into the sky and shot straight for the spirit, still struggling to crawl back to life. Mana flames lit up Noah's body, and when he spoke, his words rang out with unshakable steel. "Your end is here." He focused every ounce of strength, then unleashed the ultimate move, Absolute Flame. The spirit shrieked as hellfire chewed through its soul, and Noah stood dead calm in the heart of the blazing vortex, already certain he'd won. "This is the end," he screamed, and flames churned through the darkness like a living storm. The enemy's core quivered, then started to fall apart. Everything inside it slipped out of control and began to disintegrate. Yun and Claudia stared, breath trapped in their throats, as the spirit dissolved right before them, like smoke getting torn apart by the wind. Every adventurer fixed their eyes on that epic duel, completely hooked, and couldn't tear themselves away. As the darkness lifted, the turtle slammed down with a thunderous roar, rattling the capital, and that long-hanging threat finally crumbled right along with it. Relief and pure joy crashed through the crowd like a wave, because they'd actually done it. The sleepy turtle was defeated. Noah hovered in the air, dead calm and razor-focused, whispering, "I kept my promise, the world is safe now." Noah barely got the words out before his eyelids sank shut, and his strength vanished in a blink. Yun and Claudia were frozen in shock as he suddenly fainted and crumpled toward the ground. Serena lunged ahead, voice cracking as she begged, "Please just hold on." Like a thunderstorm ripping open the sky, Alexia burst into view, slicing through the air. Noah was inches from the ground, so wiped out that he couldn't defend himself or even run away. The girl lunged forward by a hair's breadth, sprinting after his falling body before it hit the ground. At the very last second, she grabbed the young man, slammed him into a tight embrace, and both of them crashed to the ground with a brutal thud. Alexia threw her body in front of the blow, taking the full hit so Noah barely got scratched. As they lay there, the spirit of darkness crawled out of the turtle's ruined shell, roaring with laughter over the shattered city. He grinned and told us with cruel certainty that he'd be back in 100, and maybe even 1,000, years to tear revenge out of Noah's descendants. Then, straight out of the emptiness the turtle left behind, a radiant arrow shot through the dark and the spirit's body twisted, screaming in pain. The holy arrow of Hildegard was finally in play, and the mage could feel it. The enemy had gotten strangely weak. Without pausing, he pulled the trigger again, one more blast that tore straight through the darkness like it wasn't even there. The third arrow landed, and the spirit hissed in agony, begging for a deal and swearing it could unleash limitless power. For one brief heartbeat, the mage stalled, ears drinking in those sweet, dangerous promises. But it still wasn't enough. Gildigan snapped his icy gaze forward and fired another blinding burst of light. "If you'd shown up years ago, maybe," he breathed out, voice shaking, "but now it's gone, too late." The spirit crumbled into black ash. The mage snapped his hand up, cutting the spell midair, and watched the mana drain away like morning mist fading. Glancing at his palm, he leaned close to Rene and murmured, "Just a little longer, my love." His voice shook as he said, "Your son just saved the world. I laughed at him as weak, now I'm face to face with the strongest mage alive." Hildegand finally got it for the first time. Noah isn't just competing anymore, the strongest in the world is his, and it's earned. The boy's name rippled through the palace like an echo, as someone urged him to lie down just for one more minute. When Noah finally snapped back to reality, he cracked his eyes open. At first, the whole world felt like it was still trapped in a dream. When he peered closer, the chambers of the Yun estate came into focus, and even with his strength running on fumes, a strange calm washed over him. Alexia was half asleep on the floor, sprawled with her back pressed against the bed. Noah slowly pushed himself up, and right then the door swung open as Fafnir slipped inside, transformed into a girl with that irresistible sparkle blazing in his eyes. With a laid-back grin, the dragon said the fight was pure spectacle. Noah couldn't believe it. Just a day and a half had passed since the victory, and somehow it felt like an entire lifetime had slammed by. Fafnir added that when Noah passed out, Alexia rushed in and saved him, so that young man owes her his life and should be endlessly grateful. Noah leaned toward the window and asked about the city, and Fafnir flashed a grin. Reconstruction is booming, and people are singing praises with his name. Healing fairies burst into the room, rushing to bandage the wounded, and the residents thank them with all their hearts. When they asked why Fafnir is still wearing a human body, he just smirked and said he doesn't want to freak the residents out while he's out there volunteering. Noah flashed a smile, right then Alexia jolted awake and he quietly threw out an apology for waking her. She dragged her heavy eyelids up and let her eyes wander forward, half asleep but curious. Then he froze, stunned to see Noah already standing on his own 2 feet. Serena burst into the room and lit up, shouting how thrilled she was that he was awake. Then Yun slipped in right behind her. Noah smiled at them like old friends. He had no idea they'd both bled on the front lines too. Serena launched into a spirited talk about reconstruction the moment the room went still, while Alexia sat on the edge of the bed in tense silence, watching everything unfold. A flicker of jealousy sparked in her eyes as she stared at carefree Serena. Later, Noah and Alexia stepped before the king and the monarch stared them down, saying Yun had already spilled every last detail. The king lit up with pride at their achievement and declared it loud and clear. Alexei is made second-class mage while Noah gets first-class mage, the highest rank in the whole kingdom. Noah thanked her, clocked Alexia's confusion and told her straight up, "This is one of the biggest honors out there and you've got to take it with pride." The monarch went out of his way to thank Noah for saving his daughter, Claudia, and when the dust settled, Noah awkwardly confessed he still had no idea where she came from during the fight. The king, rubbing his beard and wearing a grim face, snapped that he wanted to talk about Noah's future and what it means for his father. He kept repeating the rumors Hildegand renounced his own son and threw him out of the house, and if it's true, that father had better brace for the punishment he deserves. Noah bowed his head. Everything played out exactly as planned, but he refused to let the conversation end in revenge. The young man shot up and said it with total certainty: his father had changed. He flicked his eyes to Alexia and after a quick beat she confirmed it. Noah opened up about how his mother died during childbirth and that crushing loss turned his father cold with bitterness, so Noah doesn't hate him and he begs for mercy. The king's hard stare melted as he asked Noah if simple forgiveness was really enough, and the boy nodded like he already knew the path he was taking was right. Claudia snapped him back to the next meeting and the king, coming to his senses, thanked Noah again for saving the kingdom. The monarch rose with a blessing on his lips and waved them out, and the guards grabbed Noah and Alexia to follow them. They stared at each other, stunned, then they bolted down the corridor and a door swung open right in front of them, and a towering balcony slammed them with a thunderous wave of applause from every single person in the room. Thousands of people erupted into applause and shouted their gratitude, and the whole air crackled with triumphant energy. Noah and Alexia snapped upright, pride blazing in their chests as their smiles lit up, pure, grateful joy pouring from their faces. The crowd erupted in thanks for destroying the sleeping turtle, and the two heroes locked eyes, both of them instantly knowing their battle had truly paid off. Yun and Serena stood shoulder to shoulder, glowing with proud victory, while Nissa beamed from Fenrir's back, soaking in the whole festive celebration. The jaw-dropping quest, taming the sleepy turtle, is finally over. Every fight and sacrifice slammed into this one blazing moment of glory. Suddenly, a booming voice ripped through the mansion. "Noah, are you leaving already?" And Yun's impatient tone froze the air as everyone snapped their heads toward him. Noah, standing right on the threshold, just nodded and smiled. Because sure, new roads were calling, but the promise to come back was rock solid.